I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door opening, and I knew immediately something was wrong. The door wasn't supposed to open. I was staying at my college friend Vanessa's place, sleeping in the guest room, and nobody had any reason to come in there at 3 a.m. But there was a dark figure in the doorway, too tall and broad to be Vanessa. It was Marcus, her uncle who lived with her after his divorce. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I heard the soft click of the latch, and then he whispered my name, real quiet, like he was checking if I was awake. My whole body went rigid. I kept my breathing slow and even, pretending to be knocked out, because I honestly didn't know what else to do. I was 23, in a strange house in a suburb I barely knew, and this man I'd met 2 days ago was standing over me in the dark. The mattress dipped near my feet as he sat down on the edge of the bed. A second later, I felt his hand on my leg through the blanket, hovering there at first, then pressing his fingers down like he was testing how deeply I was sleeping. Every instinct I had was yelling at me to move, to shove him away, to yell for Vanessa, but my brain just locked up and my eyes stayed shut. Then, out of nowhere, the front door slammed open downstairs, and Vanessa's voice carried up the hallway, loud and casual, calling that she was home early. Marcus jerked his hand back, shot up from the bed, and practically ran out of the room. I heard his footsteps rush down the hall, and then his voice, calm and normal, saying, "Hey, Ness," like he'd just gotten up for a glass of water. I lay there frozen, heart pounding so hard it hurt, trying to process how close that had just been, and how different things might have gone if her shift hadn't been cut short. Let me back up to 3 days before that happened. I'd driven up from Eugene to the suburbs outside Portland to visit Vanessa over a long weekend. We'd been roommates freshman year and stayed close even after she moved back home for nursing school, and I stayed to finish my degree. When she invited me up, it sounded simple. Free place to stay, some wine, Netflix, catch up on gossip, just normal, we're adults now but still broke girl stuff. She mentioned that her uncle Marcus was living with her now after a bad divorce, said he could be a bit odd, and that sometimes she'd find him sitting in the dark kitchen at weird hours, or hear him walking the hall at night. I remember asking straight out, "You feel safe with him there?" And she kind of laughed and waved it off. "He's harmless, just Marcus. He's really good about bills and stuff. He just keeps weird hours," she said. She told me he worked nights as a security guard at some mall, and that he'd mostly keep to himself while I was there. I trusted her judgment. If she'd really been worried, she wouldn't be sharing a house with him. So I filed odd uncle away in my head and didn't think much more about it. The first day was completely normal. We ordered takeout, sat on the couch in leggings and hoodies, stalked old dorm people on Instagram, and watched some trashy dating show until way too late. Marcus worked the night shift, so that first night I only saw him for a few minutes when he walked through the living room on his way out. He was polite but stiff, gave me a quick, "Nice to finally meet you, Morgan," and a half smile, then disappeared out the door. If anything, I felt a little guilty for expecting creepy uncle vibes. By the second day, the house just felt like Vanessa's place, with an extra closed door at the end of the hall and a pair of men's boots by the front mat. Thursday night, Vanessa got called in for an overnight shift at the hospital. She was annoyed about it and kept apologizing, asking if I'd be okay alone with Marcus there, and even offering to text her neighbor to check in on me. I told her I was fine. I had my laptop, some remote work for my internship, and leftovers in the fridge. It wasn't like I'd never stayed in someone else's house before. After she left, the place felt quiet, but in a normal way. I sat up at the kitchen table with my laptop and headphones and got sucked into emails and spreadsheets for a few hours. Around 11 p.m. Marcus came home, which immediately felt off because Vanessa had said his shift usually ended around sunrise. He walked into the kitchen still in his security uniform, looking a little washed out, and said he'd started feeling sick, so he got someone to cover for him. I did the polite, "Oh, that sucks. Hope you feel better" thing. He barely looked at me, just grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, and went straight down the hall to his room. A little while later, I noticed the light under his door was off, even though I hadn't heard the usual bathroom or kitchen noises people make before bed. Maybe 30 minutes after that, I glanced up from my screen and saw him again, standing by the open fridge in the dim light, not even really looking for anything. He was just staring at me over the door with this flat expression, glass in his hand. I pulled my headphones off and asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. He turned to the sink, filled his glass slowly, and walked away without a word. The whole thing made my skin crawl, but I talked myself out of making it a big deal. He was tired, or embarrassed about leaving work early, or just socially weird. That's what I told myself as I rushed through the rest of my tasks, shut my laptop, and headed down the hall around 1 a.m., suddenly very aware of every creak in the floor while I went into the guest room and closed my door, not locking it, because there weren't any locks on the interior doors in that house. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but woke up a couple hours later to that door opening. The hallway light was shining right through the crack, and I could see Marcus's silhouette. He came in, and I watched through barely open eyes as he shut the door and walked slowly toward the bed. Every instinct told me to scream or jump up, but I was frozen, my brain doing that stupid thing where it convinces you that staying still will make the danger go away. He knelt down next to the bed and I could hear him breathing, steady and close. Then he started whispering about how lonely he'd been since the divorce, how he'd wanted to talk to someone, how he liked having me around. His hand went to my leg and started moving up slowly. I was still pretending to sleep, but my heart was hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it. I dug my nails into my palm under the blanket, just to keep from shaking or jerking away. Then came the sound of the front door, and Vanessa calling out that her shift got cut. She sounded annoyed and tired, like this was just an inconvenience, and not the thing that was saving me. Marcus jumped up so fast he knocked into the nightstand, sending something clattering, and basically sprinted out of the room. For a few seconds I just lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening to my own pulse in my ears. I heard Marcus and Vanessa talking in the hallway, his voice way too casual, hers normal, asking why he was still up. I couldn't make my body move. It hit me all at once that if she'd come home even a minute later, his hand would have been higher, and I had no idea where that would have gone. The second I heard his bedroom door close, I finally rolled out of bed. My hands were shaking so bad I fumbled with my jeans and hoodie, but I forced myself to get dressed because there was no way I was staying alone in that room while he was awake in the house. I opened the guest room door and stepped into the hallway. The light was still on, and Vanessa was just coming out of the kitchen with her bag over her shoulder. She looked surprised to see me up. Before I could say anything, Marcus walked past us toward his room, mumbling something about being exhausted. He didn't look at me. He shut his door, and only then did I let myself breathe. Vanessa's eyes went straight to my face, and whatever she saw there wiped the sleepiness right off of hers. I threw on shoes and followed her into the kitchen. She asked what happened, her voice low, already tense like she knew it wasn't nothing. Once Marcus disappeared into his room and we heard his door click, I told her everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her about him coming home early, standing by the fridge just staring, the way he'd been at my bed twice now, touching my leg, whispering all that stuff about being lonely. While I talked, her face went completely white. She kept saying, "Are you serious? Are you sure?" But not in a doubting way, more like she couldn't believe she'd missed all the signs. Then she admitted he'd been asking about my visit for weeks. He'd made comments about how grown up I looked in my pictures when she left her phone on the table. He'd asked how long I'd be staying, if I was single, when I'd be coming back up next. She thought it was just polite interest, maybe awkward uncle talk. But standing there in her kitchen at 3 in the morning, it obviously wasn't that. She got this tight, pissed-off look on her face, told me to stay put, and marched straight down the hall to his room. I heard her knock once, then the door open. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. Her voice was low but sharp, asking what the hell he thought he was doing, why he'd been in my room, why he came home early, why he kept touching her friends. His voice stayed soft, almost whining, saying I'd misunderstood. He just wanted to talk. He'd only checked if I needed anything. She cut him off. She told him if he ever came near me again, or any of her friends, she'd call the cops and tell their whole family exactly what he'd done. There was a long pause, and then his door shut harder this time. I was already packing my bag while she was in there. I shoved my stuff into my backpack in under a minute, not caring what got wrinkled. Vanessa came back down the hall and said, "Grab your things, we're leaving." No hesitation. No, maybe it's fine. She told me we were going to her parents' place a short drive away, that they had a guest room and locks on the doors. She apologized over and over as we walked to the car, kept saying she never would have invited me if she'd thought for a second he was capable of that. I believed her. She was shaking almost as hard as I was. Later that week, after I was back in Eugene, she texted me that she'd given Marcus a week to move out. He tried to play it off, said again that I'd misread everything, that he was just depressed and lonely, and that she was overreacting. She didn't buy it. She stuck to it, made him leave, and changed the locks after he was gone. I never saw Marcus again after that night, and I hope I never do. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Vanessa's shift hadn't gotten cut short, if she hadn't walked in right when she did, and it still makes me feel sick that my safety came down to something as random as a nurse manager deciding to send her home early. I rent this small house on the outskirts of Seattle, single story with a garage and a tiny backyard. I'd only been here 4 months, but I liked how predictable it felt. I worked late most nights, came home, microwaved something, zoned out to TV, slept, repeated. That particular Wednesday, I pulled into the driveway at 8 p.m., which threw me off because I was usually still at my desk then. My boss had sent everyone home early because of system issues. On the drive back, I thought about maybe going to the gym or finally folding laundry. But as soon as I stepped inside and felt how quiet the house was, all that disappeared. I kicked my shoes off by the door, dropped my bag on the entry table, and went straight to the kitchen. I heated up leftover pasta, ate it standing over the sink because I didn't feel like dirtying another dish, then changed into an old t-shirt and leggings. I ended up in the living room with my laptop because I still hadn't finished a report from earlier. The TV was on in the background more for company than anything. I remember scrolling through emails and thinking my eyes already burned even though it wasn't that late yet. Outside, it was just that typical suburban silence. No sirens, no traffic, just nothing. Around 10 p.m., I realized I'd been staring at the same paragraph for way too long. My brain felt done. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and told myself I'd get up early to finish before work. I turned off the TV, checked the deadbolt on the front door like I always do, hit the hallway light, stopped in the bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, then went to my bedroom. I plugged my phone in, set my alarm without really even looking at the time, lay down, and I'm pretty sure I was asleep in under a minute. I woke up to a sound that didn't fit. A sharp creak from the hallway snapped me fully awake. There was no slow, groggy phase, just instant awareness, and my heart suddenly going way too fast. I lay on my back, staring at the dark outline of the ceiling fan, holding my breath to listen. The house was relatively new, and in the 4 months I'd been renting it, the floors never creaked like that. A couple of seconds later, it came again. A long, drawn-out creak, like weight shifting on one board just outside my door. My first thought was weirdly specific. Did I lock the front door? I always lock it. I could picture my hand on the deadbolt, but I couldn't remember the actual feeling of it turning. Another sound came, farther away this time, toward the kitchen. It wasn't random settling. It was paced. Slow, careful footsteps, like someone trying not to be heard. Creak, pause, creak, pause. My mouth went dry. Then I heard the refrigerator open. That soft suction sound. A faint clink of something on the shelves. Then it closed. A few seconds later, the kitchen faucet handle lifted with that metal click. Water ran briefly, then shut off. That was the moment the idea of, maybe I'm imagining this, pretty much died. Someone was in my house, walking around like they lived there. I slid my hand along the nightstand until I found my phone and wrapped my fingers around it. But I didn't turn the screen on. I didn't want any light leaking out under the door. Every tiny movement I made sounded loud to me, even the shift of my weight as I sat up. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, moving slowly so the mattress wouldn't squeak, and padded toward the doorway. I never close it completely at night. I like being able to hear what's going on in the rest of the house. Right then, that habit suddenly felt stupid. The door was slightly open, just enough that I could see a slice of the hallway. There was a glow coming from the direction of the kitchen, bright enough to light up the wall. I knew I'd turned that light off before bed. Seeing it on now made everything feel very literal. There was a stranger between me and my front door. I leaned forward a little and looked through the gap. On the wall across from me, I saw a shadow moving, stretched out and shifting as whoever it was walked slowly down the hallway toward my room. I stepped back fast enough that the floor almost creaked under me, caught myself, then reached for the edge of the door. I pulled it in toward the frame until it was almost closed, stopping right before the latch would click. My fingers were tight on the wood. My breathing sounded way too loud in my ears, so I lifted my other hand and pressed it over my mouth to muffle it. The footsteps kept coming, unhurried, like the person knew exactly where they were going. Then they stopped right at my door. Through the narrow slit at the bottom, I could see the shadow of their feet, a dark shape blocking the hallway light. I stared at that line of darkness, counting seconds in my head, convinced they could somehow hear my heartbeat. They just stood there on the other side of the thin panel of wood, maybe 10 seconds, maybe more, and I stayed frozen with my hand over my mouth and my phone in my other hand, until the feet finally shifted, the shadow turned, and they moved on down the hallway toward the living room. I heard sounds from the living room again, papers rustling and something light being dragged over the floor. It was my pile of mail and printouts on the coffee table. I knew that sound. Then I heard the click of my laptop opening. Whoever this was wasn't rushing. No drawers slamming, no quick footsteps. He moved like he had time, like he belonged there. My brain bounced between panic and this cold, practical part trying to plan. I finally lit up my phone screen. I almost hit the call button, then imagined him hearing my voice or the dispatcher and changed my mind. I opened the 911 text option instead and typed, "Someone in my house, I'm locked in my bedroom," added my address, and sent it. Watching the little sending icon felt like forever, even though it was probably a few seconds. I kept my eyes on the crack under the door and tried to breathe quietly. Footsteps crossed the living room, slower now. My desk chair rolled a bit. A drawer slid open, then another. The phone buzzed in my hand and made me jump. The reply said, "Help on the way. ETA 8 minutes. Stay in a safe place. Do not confront." 8 minutes felt unreal. Out in the living room, he pulled the chair in, sat down from the sound of it, and started typing. Keys clicked in this slow, steady way, not frantic at all. He wasn't tossing the house for cash or electronics. He was using my laptop. I remember staring at the window and thinking, if he tries my door, I'm going out that way, no matter what I land on. I pictured how fast I could get the screen up, if the lock would stick, if I could climb through without getting stuck and just make it to the fence before he reached me. Time went strange after that. I checked the clock on my phone, and maybe a minute had passed, but my legs were shaking like I'd been there an hour. I slid down to sit on the floor with my back against the dresser, one hand still on the door so it stayed almost shut. The typing stopped and started again. Sometimes I heard him move a few steps, like he was looking at something, then sit back down. No talking, no sighing, just quiet and keys. Somewhere in there a siren started up, faint at first. I told myself it was for someone else, because sirens always are, but it got louder and closer. The chair in the living room scraped back hard. Footsteps crossed the room fast, then went down the hallway toward the kitchen. I heard the back door handle snap and the door swing open. A cold draft slipped under my door, and then it was silent. A few seconds later, someone hammered on the front door, and a man shouted, "Police! Open up!" I opened my bedroom door and ran to the front as two officers came in, one asking if I was hurt, while the other moved through the rooms. They cleared the house fast. Then everything was quiet. The back door was open, and in the garage they found a high window pushed out. I'd never bothered to lock it. Nothing was missing. My purse, TV, everything was there. On the coffee table, my laptop was open to my work calendar, the one with my late shifts and trips. Police never found him, and I still lie awake wondering why he cared about my schedule and what he was waiting to do. Last summer, my buddy Nathan invited me out to this rental house his parents owned about an hour outside Portland. They usually put it on Airbnb, but had a gap in bookings, so we figured we'd have a chill weekend. Fishing, grilling, playing some board games, the usual. I was 25, tired of staring at a computer all week, so a couple of days in the woods sounded perfect. The place was pretty isolated, trees on one side, the closest neighbors somewhere beyond the tree line. Nathan had been there a bunch and kept pointing stuff out, where the spare keys were, which door stuck, that kind of thing. His older brother Lucas was supposed to show up Saturday evening after a trucking run. We got in late Friday, dropped our bags, cracked a few beers, and sat on the back porch talking until around midnight. It felt normal, but Nathan kept checking his phone between stories, locking the screen quick whenever I glanced over. When I asked, he just said, "My dad's being weird about the place, wants us to lock everything," and changed the subject. Before we went in, he did a full lap, testing every door and window, making sure the deadbolts were turned. He joked, he thinks people hike in just to rob an empty house, but he still checked each lock twice. Standing in the living room, I watched the windows turn into black mirrors, the yard just dropping off into trees. Once or twice, I thought I heard a single crack from the woods, like a branch under someone's foot. But when I actually listened, there was nothing. We brushed it off. He took the bedroom on the first floor. I took the couch. Lights out. A little after 1, Nathan went to shower, and I stepped back out for a smoke. With the inside lights on, and the porch light off, the glass door just showed my reflection and a strip of overgrown grass before it vanished into black. Somewhere off to the side, the AC unit hummed. Halfway through the cigarette, I heard a sound from the woods, that same sharp cracking but slower, spaced out, like footsteps through brush. I stopped breathing and just listened. 2, maybe 3 more snaps, closer than before, then nothing. No flashlight, no voice, no animal noises, just the AC. After a minute of silence, I told myself it was a deer, flicked the butt into the gravel, locked the door out of habit, and went back in. Nathan was already in bed scrolling his phone in the dark. I said goodnight. He put it down, and the room went completely black except for a tiny LED from the TV in the corner. I lay there on the couch, listening to the AC kick on and off, the fridge cycle, the occasional pop from the walls. Eventually, I drifted off. At some point, the cold woke me up. The AC was blasting and the thin blanket wasn't doing anything. I sat up, rubbing my arms, planning to dig in the hall closet for another blanket. That's when I saw movement outside the living room window. At first, I thought it was my reflection shifting, but then it slid out of frame and came back from the other side. I froze. There was a person right up against the side of the house. Tall, thin, hood up, dark clothes that blended into everything except where the glass caught them. He moved slowly along the wall, stopping at each window to lean in, head tilted like he was looking for something specific, then gliding out of view and reappearing at the next one. No flashlight, no phone glow, nothing. My first thought was Lucas, showing up early, but Lucas is shorter and built like a truck. This guy was lankier, and he moved different, careful, like he was trying not to make noise. He stepped up onto the porch and tried the back door, turning the handle twice, harder the second time. I heard the deadbolt knock against the frame. He didn't knock, didn't say anything. Then he walked over to the living room window and pressed his face right against it, hands on either side, peering in. I dropped flat off the couch, hit the floor, and stayed there, holding my breath. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he'd hear it. After a few seconds, I started army crawling toward Nathan's bedroom, keeping low so I stayed below the window line. My phone was plugged in on his nightstand, and the nearest neighbor was a long way through the trees. Yelling for help wasn't going to do anything except tell this guy where I was. The floor creaked once under my knee and I froze, listening. No tap on the glass, no footsteps on the porch, nothing. I kept going. When I reached Nathan's door, I tapped it fast with my fingertips, barely touching the wood. After a few seconds, I heard him shift and the door opened a crack. He looked half asleep and annoyed and started whispering, "Dude, what are you?" I pushed past, slipped inside, and covered his mouth with my hand. I leaned down and whispered right in his ear, "Someone's outside, checking the windows. Tried the door." I felt his whole body go rigid under my hand. We locked ourselves in immediately, turning the lock slowly and sliding the little chain across, even though it was more psychological than anything. Nathan grabbed his phone and dialed 911 with one hand, while the other stayed wrapped around the knob like he expected it to turn any second. I sat on the floor by the bed staring at the gap under the door, listening to him try to explain where we were to the operator, describing it as my parents' rental off the main road, long gravel driveway, woods all around. A few seconds after he gave the address, we heard glass break from the kitchen side of the house. One sharp crack, then a heavier crash, then the unmistakable sound of someone climbing over the sill and dropping inside. The operator was still asking questions while we sat there not moving, barely breathing. We could hear footsteps moving through the house, opening doors and cabinets, getting closer to where we were. The footsteps came right up to our door, and the handle started turning. Nathan looked at me once, then went straight to his closet and pulled out this old aluminum baseball bat his dad kept there. He handed it to me first, then changed his mind and kept the bat while I grabbed the heavy mag light from the top shelf. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. The door itself was just a hollow interior door, nothing special, and every time the handle rattled I pictured it splintering in half with one good kick. Nathan had the phone on speaker, and the dispatcher kept repeating that officers were on the way, that we needed to stay inside the room, stay on the line, don't engage if we didn't have to. The handle stopped turning, and for a few seconds there was nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence on the other side. Nathan mouthed, "Did he leave?" And I shook my head because I didn't know and didn't want him to move closer to the door to check. The dispatcher asked if we could still hear him, and Nathan said, "I don't know. I think he's right outside." In this low voice I'd never heard from him before. Then, instead of a kick, we heard slow steps moving away from us, across the hallway, back toward the kitchen side. A drawer opened, then another, like he was casually going through the place. After a minute or two, we heard the front door open. The dispatcher told us not to move yet. I stepped over to the bedroom window and lifted one corner of the blinds just enough to see. The porch light was off, but the motion light over the driveway came on, and I saw him from the side. Same tall, thin build, hood up, a backpack slung over one shoulder, Nathan's laptop under his arm, and what looked like bottles clinking inside a grocery bag in his hand. He didn't look back at the house at all. He just jogged down the gravel, cut off toward the tree line, and disappeared into the dark like he'd done this 100 times. We stayed in that room until the dispatcher said the officers were pulling into the driveway. Only then did Nathan unlock the door. The house felt different, like it had been picked apart. Kitchen drawers were open, a couple cabinets too, and the window over the sink was shattered with glass all over the counter. One of the cops did a sweep with his hand on his gun, checking closets in the basement, while the other asked us basic questions in the living room. They already knew, before we finished explaining, that my friend's laptop was gone. There was cash missing from a drawer in the hallway, and a fancy bottle of whiskey from a little shelf in the dining area. The officer who seemed in charge finally said there had been a string of burglaries like this in the area. Same pattern every time. They were almost always hitting rental houses and Airbnbs, places where the owners didn't live full-time. He said whoever did it usually watched the houses to see when people checked in, then came back late at night assuming tourists wouldn't have guns, wouldn't know the back roads, and would be slower to call for help because they didn't know exactly where they were. He said 3 other places had been hit that month using almost the same method. We gave our statements, walked through the rooms with them, tried to remember anything that might help. I mentioned the noises I'd heard from the woods earlier, and one of the officers nodded like that fit exactly what they'd been expecting to hear. When they were done, they asked if we wanted to stay until morning with them doing extra patrols, or if we'd feel better packing up and heading back to the city right away. Neither of us even hesitated. Nathan said, "We're leaving." And that was that. It was around 4 in the morning when we loaded our bags into Nathan's car and left the place half lit up, broken glass still in the sink. We didn't bother calling Lucas. Nathan just texted his brother later that day saying there'd been a break-in and the weekend was off. His parents were furious and scared at the same time. Within a week, they had a proper security system installed, cameras on the corners, motion lights everywhere, and they stopped renting to random guests online for a while, only letting friends or family use the house. I still think about that guy's face pressed up to the glass, and how long he might have stood there watching me sleep, trying the door and walking window to window deciding when to come in. Before that night, I treated locked doors like a formality. Now, anytime I stay somewhere that isn't my own place, I walk the whole property and check every lock twice, sometimes 3 times, and I keep my phone charged and within reach, because I know now that sometimes the only difference between a scary story and a news article is whether the person on the porch decides they want more than your stuff. So, when I was 34, I worked as an administrator at a self-service car wash in the suburbs. My job was simple: watch the equipment, help people with payment issues, clean up the property. Night shift paid 30% more, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and usually nothing interesting happened. Customers would drive in, wash their cars in the bays, drive out. One Friday night in late October around 1 a.m., this guy rode in on a sport bike, a Yamaha. He pulled up to my office window, paid cash for a wash, and rode over to bay number 3. I barely looked up because I was halfway through an energy drink, trying to stay awake while the cameras scrolled on the monitor. Cash customers are easy. Punch in the bay, give them a code, done. He had on a black riding jacket, dark jeans, full-face helmet with the visor down. I only really noticed his hands when he passed the bills through the slot. No gloves, knuckles scraped up, a couple small cuts like he'd been in a fight or dropped the bike earlier. I thought, whatever. Biker stuff. He didn't say much either. Just a quick, Bay 3, and I handed him the slip, watched him roll off. From the office window I could see spray from the pressure washer drifting out of Bay 3. I remember thinking it was a little weird seeing someone wash a bike at 1 in the morning, but we got detail freaks all the time. People who couldn't sleep and decided their cars were dirty. It was cold out, but not freezing. That kind of damp fall cold that makes the concrete sweat. I put him out of my mind and opened up the monthly report on the computer, trying to stay on top of the numbers so I wouldn't have to rush at the end of the shift. I went back to working on the monthly report, checking the cameras every now and then. The guy washed his bike for about 10 minutes, then rode it out of the bay. But instead of leaving, he parked the motorcycle in the far corner of the lot near the fence. I watched on the camera as he got off the bike, took off his helmet, and just walked away on foot toward the exit. That was strange. Why leave your bike? I walked outside and called out to him. "Hey man, you forgot your motorcycle." He turned around, waved his hand, yelled back, "My buddy's picking it up in half an hour," and kept walking. He disappeared into the dark beyond our lot toward the residential area nearby. I went back inside, figuring his friend would actually show up. That explanation made enough sense that I didn't stress about it. People leave cars for ride shares all the time, ditch vehicles overnight when they lock their keys inside, all kinds of stuff. And technically, as long as they aren't blocking a bay or the vacuums, management doesn't care where they park for a bit. I did glance up at the monitor more often than usual, though. The bike just sat there on camera 4, a little triangle of metal in the corner under the busted floodlight. Every time a car pulled in, I checked if they slowed near it, but nobody did. They just came through, paid, washed, left. Normal. An hour passed, then 2. Nobody came for the motorcycle. It just sat there in the same spot. Around 3 a.m., I decided to walk over and check it out. As I got closer, I started noticing things that didn't add up. The VIN number on the frame was partially scratched off, like someone had taken a file or something to it. The license plate looked homemade, wrong format, wrong font. There was a leather bag on the seat stuffed with something heavy. I didn't touch the bag, but I could see it was full. The back end of the bike was dented and scraped like it had been in a collision recently. I took some photos on my phone and walked back to the office. This didn't feel right at all. I called the non-emergency police line and explained what was going on, sticking to facts. Guy on a Yamaha around 1, paid cash, washed the bike, parked it in the corner, walked away, scratched VIN, weird plate, heavy bag on the seat. The dispatcher asked how long it had been there and if anything felt urgent. I told her it was quiet, but didn't look right. She said they'd send a patrol when one was free. After I hung up, I locked the office door and watched the cameras. The bike sat there alone. Every set of headlights pulling in made me think he was back. About 40 minutes later, a patrol car rolled onto the lot and stopped by my door. A male officer in his 40s and a younger female officer got out. Inside, I went through the story again, while the older one took notes and the younger one asked for rough times, what the guy was wearing, whether he seemed drunk or high. Then we walked over to the motorcycle together. The male officer circled it without touching anything, shined his flashlight on the VIN, and radioed what he could read. A few minutes later, his radio crackled, and he turned to me and said, "This bike's been reported stolen since 2 days ago, from the next county over." They moved fast after that. The younger officer went back to the cruiser, grabbed tape and a couple small cones, and they blocked off the corner around the bike. They told me not to let any customers drive or walk into that section, and to call 911 right away if the guy came back. We went into the office so I could give a full written statement. I filled out their form. Then the older officer had me tell the story again on their in-car camera. After that, I pulled up our cameras and showed them everything. Him riding in, handing me cash at the window, washing the bike, then walking off toward the houses. When the frame froze on his face at the window, visor up, the younger officer said that would be enough to identify him. They asked me to copy the clips to a thumb drive, so I grabbed one from the drawer and saved all the files. Around 5, a tow truck showed up with a plainclothes detective. He walked the scene, talked quietly with the officers, then came in to confirm my contact info and have me sign a couple more lines. Then they loaded the bike and cleared out. The lot looked normal again, but I spent the rest of my shift jumpy, half expecting the guy to roll back in. He never did. 2 days later, the detective called while I was getting ready for a night shift. He thanked me and said the motorcycle had been stolen and used in a series of break-ins across 3 counties, grabbing tools and equipment. From our camera footage, they identified the suspect. He had priors for burglary and vehicle theft. They picked him up at a storage unit he'd rented under a fake name. The bag on the bike had held burglary tools and stolen property worth several $1,000s, some of it already matched back to owners. I still think about that night sometimes, because that guy was standing right at my window, close enough to see my name tag and decide what to do with me. And if he'd come back while I was out there alone or had been desperate enough to pull a gun, it could have ended differently. The elevator door wouldn't open. I pressed the button again and again, but nothing happened. Behind me in the empty hallway, I could hear his breathing and his footsteps coming closer. My thumb hit the button one more time, hard enough to hurt, and the panel just blinked. That was when it hit me how stupid it was that I'd stayed this late. To explain how I ended up there, I need to go back to the start of that evening. I was working on the quarterly report and lost track of time. That happens a lot with me in spreadsheets. When I finally looked up from the monitor, it was already 10 at night. The floor was quiet in that way it only is after hours. Somewhere on the lower levels, the cleaners were moving vacuums around. I saved the file twice, emailed it to myself, shut everything down, grabbed my bag and jacket, and stepped out into the corridor. As soon as I walked out, I heard a man's voice behind me. "Burning the midnight oil again?" I turned and saw Daryl from sales standing outside his office with his phone in his hand, leaning on the doorframe and looking straight at me. His office light was still on. I realized I hadn't heard him around for at least an hour, and it bothered me that I hadn't noticed he was still here. Daryl had been in the company about 3 years. He was always a bit too friendly. In meetings, his eyes would stay on me longer than made sense. In the elevator, he'd ask about my personal life in this forced, casual tone, like he'd practiced the questions. A couple of times he made comments about my dress or shoes, nothing filthy, just said in a way that made my skin crawl. It was never enough for a complaint, but enough for me to make a quiet rule. Never stay alone with him if I could avoid it. So when he smiled and asked if I was really working all alone this late, I kept it short. "No, I'm done. Just heading out," I said, lifting my bag. I turned toward the elevators. He fell into step beside me like we were leaving together and started talking about how much he loved the special atmosphere of an empty building, how it helped him focus, how he also liked to stay until midnight. We reached the elevator lobby. I stepped toward the call button, but he moved a little faster and ended up between me and the panel. Not aggressive, just too close. He didn't press anything. Instead, he turned toward me. "I'll walk you to the parking lot," he said. "It's not safe for a woman to be out there alone at night, and it's on my way." I knew his car was on the opposite side of the building. The way he said it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like he was waiting for me to agree to something he'd already decided. "I need to go to the ladies' room first," I said. I kept my voice light. "Then I'm heading straight down." He watched my face for a second, then nodded. "I'll wait for you here," he said, "for safety." The way he repeated that made my chest tighten. I turned away and pushed open the door to the restroom. As I went in, I heard the door from the corridor close behind me, but not fully. It stopped and stayed slightly open. He'd held it. I walked into a stall, locked it, sat down without needing to, and pulled out my phone. I knew I did not want to walk anywhere with him. I didn't even want to step back into the hallway while he was standing there. I opened my messages and scrolled to Maria. She's a colleague and friend who lives about 5 minutes from the office. I typed, "Are you home? Please come to the office now and call me from the parking lot. It's important." I stared at it, then added, "I'm okay, just don't want to leave alone," and sent it. The signal in that restroom is bad, so I watched the little sending icon until it finally went through. About a minute later, my phone buzzed. "On my way. I'll call when I'm outside," Maria wrote. I let out a slow breath I hadn't noticed I was holding and stayed sitting there. I checked the time, then checked it again what felt like 30 seconds later. It crawled. I could still hear the faint hum of the air system, and behind it, the small noise from the not-quite-closed door when the building shifted. Around 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Maria's name lit up the screen. I answered on the first ring and deliberately raised my voice. "Yeah, I'm already heading down," I said clearly. "I'll meet you at the main entrance in a minute. Just stay in the car." I hoped every word carried through that gap in the door. I hung up, put the phone in my bag, and forced myself to move. I unlocked the stall, washed my hands slowly just to add a few more seconds, then walked to the exit. I pushed the restroom door open and stepped back into the corridor. Daryl was still there, in the same place near the elevators. He was looking down at his phone, but it was obvious he'd been waiting for me. I told him my friend was waiting for me downstairs and I had to go. For a second his face changed, like he was annoyed. Then it smoothed out, and he smiled and said goodnight. The shift was so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been staring at him. He finally pressed the elevator button. We stood there in silence, side by side, while we waited. When the doors opened, I stepped in first and went to the front of the elevator, facing the doors. Daryl came in after me and stayed behind me, a little to my left. I could see him in the narrow mirror above the panel. He wasn't looking at the floor numbers or his phone. He was looking straight at my reflection. His eyes didn't move. I focused on the lights counting down and told myself it was just 1 minute, maybe less. I kept replaying Maria's voice in my head, her saying she was outside and waiting. Someone knew I was there. Someone was expecting me. If he tried to insist on walking me to my car, I could just say we were leaving together with her. I used that as a reason not to panic. My palms were wet on the strap of my bag. Nobody else got on. The ride felt longer than usual, even though I knew it wasn't. When the doors slid open into the lobby, I saw Maria right away through the glass entrance doors. She was standing near the curb, looking around like she was trying to spot me. I didn't wait. I walked out of the elevator fast, almost a jog, and pushed through the lobby doors toward her. Behind me, I heard Daryl's steps slow down. I didn't have to turn to know he'd stopped in the foyer instead of following me out. It fit the image he liked to show, the polite guy who just happened to be nearby. Maria saw my face, and her expression changed immediately. I went straight to her, hugged her quickly, and we both turned and headed to her car without stopping to talk inside. As we walked away, I glanced back through the glass. Daryl was standing near the reception desk, hands in his pockets, just watching us. He didn't smile or wave. He just stood there until the doors closed behind us. We got into Maria's car, and she locked the doors as soon as we were inside. The moment the locks clicked, she asked, "What happened? You sounded weird on the phone." While she started the engine, I told her everything. Him waiting by the elevator, the bathroom door not fully closing, the way he insisted on walking me to the parking lot, how he watched me in the elevator mirror without blinking. Saying it out loud made it feel more solid, less like I was imagining things. Maria kept glancing at me, and then at the building in the mirrors, her mouth tight. The next day, I went to our HR manager after lunch and told her what had happened. I stuck to the facts. I explained how late it was, the comments he'd made before, him waiting outside the restroom, how he'd offered to walk me for safety, even though his car was in another area. I said that nothing physical happened, but I felt unsafe and cornered. She listened without interrupting and wrote everything down. When I finished, she said this wasn't the first time someone had come in about Daryl. 2 women from accounting had already reported his comments and the way he stared at them, especially when they worked late. Hearing that hit me harder than I expected. It meant this wasn't just me being sensitive. This was a pattern he'd been running for a while. HR told me she would call him in for a formal talk and that it would go on his record as an official warning. She reminded me that if anything like that happened again, I should document it and come straight back. I went to my desk with shaky hands, but at least I felt like I had done something instead of just hoping it wouldn't happen again. After that, Daryl started avoiding me. No more comments in the hallway, no more fake small talk in the elevator. In meetings, he barely looked in my direction. It was a relief, but it also confirmed he understood exactly why HR had spoken to him. I changed my own habits too. I never stayed in the office alone after 7 anymore. If I had to stay late, I told someone and checked in with Maria. We started leaving together when we could, and I parked closer to the entrance. A few days later, when it was just the 2 of us at lunch, Maria told me something that still makes me feel cold when I think about that night. She said that when she pulled into the parking lot, before she texted me, she saw Daryl first. He was walking back and forth near my car, looking around every so often, like he was waiting for someone. She watched him from her own car for about 10 minutes. Only after he went back inside did she drive around to the main entrance and call me. I keep going over that in my head, how close I was to walking down there alone like I usually did, and how he had already been out there, waiting for me in the dark, empty parking lot. A cup of cold coffee was sitting on the coffee table in the living room when I walked out of my studio at around 3 in the afternoon. I'd been hunched over my desk for hours, editing portraits for a corporate client until my eyes hurt. With noise-canceling headphones on, the rest of the house might as well not have existed. The only thing I remember doing since late morning was walking upstairs once to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. I definitely hadn't made any coffee. I stopped in the doorway and just stared at the mug. Plain white, thin brown ring inside, a film on top. No steam. It had that dead look coffee gets when it's been sitting too long. I tried to force some memory into place. Maybe I'd poured it on autopilot and forgotten. But the morning was clear. Toast, yogurt, a glass of orange juice, No kettle, no grinder, no smell of coffee. And Martha always took her own mug with her when she left. She hated leaving dishes out. Martha had gone early, before 8. She'd knocked on my door in her scrubs, said she was driving to her aunt's and would be back late that night. I'd waved at her from my bed, half awake, and the next thing I remembered was my alarm and the usual rush of, "You have a deadline, move." We'd been renting this house together for a few months. It was the calmest place I'd lived in years. Quiet residential street, neighbors who smiled but didn't pry, no weird noises, no random parties next door. I'd never once felt watched here. That stupid cup of coffee was the first thing that made me feel like someone else had been in our living room. This was mid-July, right after I finally landed a big contract from a marketing agency. For a freelance photographer, that kind of order is rent and food for a while, but also a lot of pressure. The deadline was the next day. 20 portraits of top managers who all wanted to look friendly but important. Martha worked long shifts at a private clinic, so on days like this the house was basically mine. I got up around 9, 8, checked a couple of emails, then went down to my improvised studio on the first floor. Backdrop stand in the corner, cheap soft boxes, my laptop on a folding table. I put on a playlist, opened Lightroom, and disappeared into retouching mode. Time just dropped away. It was skin, eyes, stray hairs, repeat. At some point my stomach complained, so I pulled off the headphones, went upstairs, filled a glass from the tap, grabbed an apple, stood there for maybe a minute scrolling my phone, then went back down. The kitchen had been empty. No mug on the counter, no fresh coffee smell, nothing. I finished another batch of portraits, exported them, stretched my back, and finally decided to walk around for a minute. That was when I stepped into the living room and saw the mug on the table like it had always been there. Standing there, I tried to talk myself into a normal explanation. Maybe Martha had forgotten something and come back while I had my music blasting. Maybe she didn't want to bother me, grabbed coffee, and left again. But Martha is the kind of person who texts me from the driveway if she thinks the door might squeak. And even with headphones on, I usually hear the front door at least as a vibration through the floor. I'd had a couple of quiet gaps between songs. I would have noticed. The coffee was completely cold. Whoever poured it had done it a while ago. My fingers started feeling a bit numb and shaky, which annoyed me because it felt like an overreaction. I told myself to stop spiraling and just check the house. I walked the whole first floor. Living room, kitchen, hallway. All the windows were shut, little latches turned down from the inside. The back door was locked, key still hanging on its hook where we always left it. The front door was locked too, bolt slid, chain hanging. No mud on the floor, no weird footprints, nothing pushed out of place. If someone had come in, they'd either been extremely careful or had a key. Neither of those options felt better than the other. I went upstairs. My bedroom looked exactly the way I'd left it. Laptop open on the bed, pajama shirt on the chair, camera bag under the desk. Martha's door was closed. I knocked once anyway, knowing she wasn't home, and of course there was no answer. The bathroom was empty, towel still hanging the way I'd left it after my shower that morning. Everything looked normal. That almost made it worse, like the house was insisting nothing had happened, and the only strange thing in it was me. When I came back down to the living room, I noticed something I'd missed before. A design magazine that usually lived under the TV was now lying on the edge of the couch, open somewhere in the middle, pages slightly curled like someone had been holding it. I hadn't touched that thing in at least a week. I just stood there, looking from the mug to the magazine and back, feeling this heavy knot settle in my chest. It wasn't full-on panic, more like that slow, sick feeling when you realize you've missed an important deadline and can't undo it. I told myself I was exhausted, that I'd been working too much, that people forget small things all the time. It was easier to believe my brain had glitched than to picture a stranger sitting on our couch, drinking coffee and flipping through our stuff while I was downstairs with my headphones on. Clinging to that idea, I picked up the mug, took it into the kitchen, dumped the cold coffee into the sink, rinsed the cup, and scrubbed it a little longer than necessary. Then I went back down to my studio, sat in front of the monitor, and tried to get back to work, but my concentration just wasn't the same. When Martha came back around 8 that evening, I met her in the hallway and asked, trying to sound casual, if she had stopped by the house during the day. She was taking off her shoes and froze halfway, one shoe in her hand. No? I left at 7 and went straight to my aunt's. Why? I told her about the cold coffee on the table, and the design magazine moved to the couch. Her face tightened in a way I had never seen before, and she immediately straightened up and looked past me toward the living room. Okay, that is weird, she said. Come on, we are checking the whole house. We went upstairs together. As soon as we reached the top, we saw that her bedroom door was slightly open. Martha stopped. I shut that this morning, she said quietly. She always closed it because the cat liked to jump on her uniforms and shed all over them. She nudged the door with her fingers and it swung open. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Bed made, closet closed, her work shoes under the chair. Then Martha walked over to the bedside table and froze again. You have got to be kidding me, she said. Her wallet was lying on the nightstand. She usually kept it in her bag and always took that bag with her. Today, for once, she had forgotten it. We both stared at it like it was something dirty left there by someone else. I felt that cold, crawling feeling move up my spine. Someone had been in the house, gone upstairs, pushed open the door she had closed, and seen her wallet sitting there. They had time to notice it, to think about it, and for whatever reason they had not taken it. Martha grabbed it, opened it fast, flipped through. Everything's here, she said. Cash, cards, ID, all in place. That did not comfort me. If anything, it made it feel like whoever it was had just been testing how easy it was to move around our rooms without being noticed. Martha did not waste time. Standing right there in her room, she took out her phone and called our landlord, Mr. Jenkins. She told him straight that someone had gotten into the house, that there had to be extra keys out there, and that we needed new locks immediately. I could hear his muffled voice through the speaker, trying to suggest maybe we had left a door open, maybe it was a misunderstanding. She cut him off and said if he did not change the locks, we would start looking for another place. After a moment, he agreed to come in the morning with a locksmith. He showed up the next day with an older guy who changed the cylinders in both doors and handed us new keys. Metal shavings on the floor, new screws, the smell of oil from the lock. Jenkins kept repeating that sometimes previous tenants did not return every copy, that it was probably a one-time thing. He apologized a couple of times, said we should not worry. With the new locks installed, we both tried to relax. That night we joked weakly about some idiot with an old key walking into the wrong house and getting scared off. For about 10 days, nothing strange happened. I worked, Martha worked, the cat did his usual patrol between rooms, and the routine came back. I almost convinced myself I had overreacted. Then, 10 days after the lock change, it started again. I woke up around 6 in the morning to the sound of Martha's car starting. She had an early shift. I heard the front door close, the lock turn, the engine fade down the street. I lay there for a few minutes, then gave up on sleep and went downstairs for some water. When I stepped into the hallway, the front door was open a few centimeters. Just a slim gap, enough to see the early light from outside. My stomach dropped. I shut it hard, turned the lock, and stared at it for a second. The metal looked fine. No scratches, no marks, nothing broken. I checked the back door and all the windows again, walking through the rooms with that tight heaviness in my chest. Everything was in place, the same as the night before. I called Martha at the clinic. She picked up sounding tired and rushed, but when I told her, she went silent for a second and then said she was sure she had locked the door. She even remembered pulling on it to make sure it was secure. We went over it twice, and there was still no normal explanation. That evening, after she came home, we bought an internal chain for the front door and a heavy rubber door stopper. We installed the chain ourselves and kicked the stopper into place before bed. We talked about calling the police, but in the end we did not. Nothing had been stolen. There were no marks on the locks, no proof to show anyone. There were 6 weeks left on the lease. Moving sooner would have cost money we did not really have, and we both needed time to find somewhere else, so we agreed to stay until the end and then get out. We tried to act normal, still went to work, still watched shows on the couch, but that feeling never left. From then until the day we moved out, I went to bed every night listening for every small sound in that house, waiting for a click of metal or a soft step that would mean someone was inside again, and I slept badly, listening to every sound. In the summer of 2016, I was managing night shifts at a gas station from midnight to 8 a.m., and after 2 in the morning, I was always alone after the cashier went home. The owner was saving on staff, leaving me to close the register and do the reports alone, which was both unsafe and probably illegal. The area was rough. Drunk customers, panhandlers, petty thieves, cops cruising by almost every hour. I was 28 then, tall and big, and after years there I didn't scare easy, but that evening felt different. Around 10, a new worker came in for his shift, Randy, a short, stocky guy about 35, hired only a week earlier. From day one he'd seemed off, too friendly, always smiling, eyes kind of empty, like he was pretending to be a normal guy and hadn't practiced enough. He came in that night talking before he even clocked in, bumped my arm and said, "Hey boss, long night, huh?" Like we were buddies. I stepped away, pretended to study the schedule just so he'd stop standing so close. He just leaned closer, reading over my shoulder. I told myself I was tired and picky. Night shift attracts lonely, weird people, and most of them are harmless. After midnight it slowed down like usual, and Randy mostly stayed in the stockroom, supposedly sorting boxes. Between trips he dumped his life story: alcoholic ex-wife, unfair firing, debts, sick mother who needed medicine, and I just nodded and kept working. Then he suddenly went quiet, and when I looked up he was inside the counter opening, too close, staring. "You don't talk about yourself at all," he said. "I'm telling you everything here and not a word from you." "Why?" His voice was sharp, like I owed him an answer. So I told him we were at work. I like to keep it professional, nothing personal. He stared a second, did a fake little laugh, said, "Yeah, professional," and went back through the stockroom door. By 2 a.m., the cashier finished her drawer, said goodnight, and drove off, leaving just me and Randy in the building like always. I locked the front door behind her, did my quick walkthrough, coffee off, hot food case closed, cameras rolling, and started the closing reports. Randy was supposed to finish cleaning the stockroom and be out by 2:30. Instead, a few minutes after the cashier's taillights disappeared, he walked out of the stockroom without looking at me and went straight into the staff bathroom. The door clicked shut and stayed that way. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I finished one register, stacked the bills for the safe, and realized I hadn't heard the toilet, the sink, anything. Usually people on nights couldn't wait to clock out and bolt, Hiding in the bathroom for 15 minutes didn't fit the pattern. I told myself maybe he was sick, maybe food poisoning, not my business, and tried to focus on the numbers on the screen. Still, by around the 20-minute mark, the silence was starting to feel louder than the trucks outside. I finally walked down the short hallway and knocked on the bathroom door with my knuckle. "Randy, you good?" There was a pause, then the water came on for maybe a second, like he'd been standing there in total quiet. Yeah, I'm almost done," he called back, suddenly cheerful. A minute later, he came out, uniform rumpled, face dry. No sign he'd actually used the bathroom. He didn't meet my eyes or say a word, just walked past me, pushed open the service exit, stepped outside, and let the door swing shut behind him. I stood there for a second, listening to the building settle, and felt this wave of relief I hadn't even noticed building. Fine, I thought, one less problem to babysit. I checked the latch on the service door, tugged it to be sure it was locked, then went back to the office in the rear where the safe and all the paperwork were. I set the cash on the desk, logged into the system, and started entering the totals, glancing up at the little camera monitor in the corner out of habit. Less than 10 minutes passed when I heard loud banging on the metal warehouse door. Repeated, insistent knocks. The warehouse faced an alley, and I usually ignored knocking on that door. Drunks and randoms tried it all the time, thinking they'd get booze or cigarettes cheaper. But this banging kept going, harder each time, metal rattling. It didn't sound like some wasted kid leaning on the door. It sounded like someone who knew I was there and wasn't going to stop. I tried to keep working for another minute, but it just got louder, steadier. Finally, I pushed my chair back and walked down the hallway to the warehouse door, already annoyed and a little tense. There was a narrow wired glass window at eye level. I had to step close to see, and when I did, Randy was standing right there in the alley, almost pressed to the door, like he'd been staring inside the whole time. He saw me instantly. No smile, no wave, just that blank look. My first instinct was not to open. We weren't supposed to let anyone through that door anyway, and I knew once I showed him I was willing to open it, that rule was basically gone. But he knew I was right there. I was the one stupid enough to look. I also knew I'd have to leave through that same door in a few hours, and the idea of him waiting out there again made my stomach twist. I forced my face neutral, unlocked the door, and opened it just enough to lean out. "We're closed," I said. "You okay?" He said he'd left his jacket in the staff bathroom and needed it. Said there were cigarettes and his wallet in the pocket. That made sense. I'd seen him come in with a jacket earlier. I told him to wait, and I'd grab it for him, because I did not want him back inside after the way he'd been acting. Instead of answering, he just put his hand flat on the door and pushed. He didn't slam me or anything, but he used his weight, stepped past me like I wasn't there, and I had to stumble back to keep from getting knocked over. Before I could say anything, he was already down the hall, moving straight to the staff bathroom. The door closed, and the lock clicked. I just stood there for a second in the open warehouse doorway, heart going fast, trying to decide if I was overreacting. Technically, he still worked there. Technically, he had a right to be in the building to get his stuff, and starting a fight about a door after midnight in that neighborhood didn't feel smart. I shut the warehouse door, locked it again out of habit, and walked a few steps toward the bathroom, listening. Nothing. No toilet flush, no sink, no rustling, just the AC and the cooler hum. After a couple minutes, I knocked once, harder this time. "Randy, grab your jacket and let's go. I've got to finish up." He didn't answer right away. Then, muffled, "Yeah, I'm almost done." His voice sounded flat. The minutes dragged. I checked the camera monitor in the office to see if maybe he'd slipped out somehow, but the hall camera still showed that closed bathroom door. I watched the timestamp crawl and counted it to about 15 minutes total, same as before. That was the point where the whole situation finally clicked in my head as not just annoying but wrong. And that's when the panic started to push past irritation. I panicked. Instead of staying by the exit where I could just bolt if he came out weird, I cut straight back to the office because I suddenly remembered I'd left the cash from the first register sitting right on the table, loose, not even in a bag. If he came out of that bathroom and went looking around, that money was the first thing he'd see. I yanked open the safe, shoved the stack inside, spun the dial, and had just closed it when I felt him before I saw him. He was in the doorway, filling it completely even though he wasn't tall, just standing there watching me. It was summer. The AC was running, but he was sweating hard, face shiny, hairline damp. His eyes kept jumping around the room, never really landing on my face for more than a second, and when they did stop, they stopped on the safe. My skin went cold. I grabbed my jacket from the hook with my car keys already in the pocket and said, as casual as I could, that I was just leaving early, that he could walk me out and then grab his jacket and go. I wanted him to have an easy way to back off, some normal script to follow. He didn't move. He just stayed in the doorway, blocking it with his body, and started talking again about his mother. He said the hospital bills were piling up, that she needed medicine right now, tonight, that nobody was helping him, that life was unfair, and people who had positions, he said it like that, never cared. Then he finally looked straight at me and said, clear and flat, "Lend me $300. I'll pay you back when I get my paycheck." You see how bad off I am. It wasn't a question. It was the same tone people use when they tell you to sign something. In that moment, I understood that if I said no, this wasn't going to stay a conversation. There was no one else in the building, no customers, no other workers, just me, him, and that blocked doorway. I ran through options in my head, yell, push past him, grab something heavy. But every version ended with things getting physical, and I did not want to find out what he was capable of. I also knew he had to assume I had access to cash. We were in the room with the safe, so I went for the only option that got me out of there in one piece. I kept my hands away from the safe completely, made a point of not glancing at it, and reached slowly into my own jacket pocket. I told him I didn't have $300, that I could give him what I had on me. My wallet was there from earlier. I pulled out the bills and counted them once, quickly. $280. I held it out without saying anything else. He took the money, stared at it like he was checking if I was lying, then said, in this dull, almost robotic tone, "Thanks. Really helped me out." No smile, no relief, no change at all. Just those dead eyes, handful of my rent money. For a second I thought he might ask about the safe anyway, but he just stuffed the bills into his pocket and finally stepped sideways, out of the doorway. I told him again I needed to lock up, that he should get his jacket and go home, that I hoped his mom felt better. I don't remember the exact order after that, just flashes. Walking down the hallway with him behind me, opening the warehouse door, the humid alley air hitting my face, him stepping out first, me saying goodnight like any normal shift change. What I do remember clearly is closing that metal door on his back, hearing the latch click, and then checking the lock 3 times before I let go of the handle. Once the door was shut, I almost ran to the office. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type my password into the computer. I sat down in the chair and just broke down, ugly crying, all the tension hitting at once. I didn't finish the reports. I just sat there, watching the cameras, waiting for the clock to crawl toward the end of my shift until I could force myself to walk back to that same warehouse door and leave. For some reason, I was sure he wasn't going to jump me when I left. Maybe because he'd already gotten what he came for. It never even crossed my mind to call the cops. In my head, it didn't feel like a robbery because technically I'd handed him the money. even though every part of me knew I hadn't had any real choice. I saw him one more time after that, a few days later, at the start of a shift. He came in like nothing had happened, clocked in, joked with the cashier. We didn't speak directly beyond basic work stuff, and neither of us mentioned the money or that night. I didn't ask for it back. I kept telling myself I'd sound dramatic, that I'd misunderstood, that maybe he really did need it for his mom. Then his name quietly disappeared from the schedule. He just stopped showing up, and no one seemed surprised. It's been 6 years now, but when I think about that evening, my body reacts before my brain does. Heart racing, hands sweating, this tight feeling in my throat, like I'm right back in that back room with the safe behind me and him in the doorway, realizing that the person in front of me doesn't see me as a person at all, just as something in the way of what he wants. I pulled up the security footage for the third time that week, and there it was again. 2:47 a.m., loading dock 8, motion detected, nobody there. I've been night shift supervisor at this Amazon warehouse outside Phoenix for 2 years, and I know every sound this place makes. The conveyors hum, forklifts whine, the building pops when the desert air cools. But Dock 8 has felt wrong ever since the forklift accident 3 months ago, when Miguel's leg got crushed between a pallet and the dock plate. He survived, but everyone remembers the screaming, and all the strange reports started at that spot. The first one was Martha from packing. She came in early one Saturday for overtime and told me she heard 2 men laughing down by Dock 8 while she was clocking in. When she went to tell them the shift hadn't started, the dock doors were still chained and the hallway lights were off. Nobody else had badged in yet. I told her sound carries in here and maybe it was yard guys, but I wrote it up. A few days later, Jason, one of our forklift drivers, said the bay door at 8 rolled up by itself even though the system showed no command. Then the motion sensor for that dock started pinging almost every night. Our cameras cover the doors, the ramp, and the walkway behind the yellow line. Between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m. the sensor would trigger. I'd rewind the footage, and there would be nothing at all on the screen. No birds, no plastic, no drifting shrink wrap. Just an empty ramp and blue dock lights. At the same time, the system kept flagging that zone as about 5 degrees colder than the others, even though HVAC had checked the dampers and said everything was normal. When I started this job, I figured nights in a warehouse would be quiet, maybe boring. I was wrong. The building is huge, but at night it's just me, 2 other supervisors, and around 15 workers. We rotate through zones every couple of hours so nobody's alone for long. Dock 8 sits in the northeast corner, away from the main sort lines, so it always feels a little cut off. After Miguel's accident, corporate safety did a full inspection of that dock, checked the leveler, restraints, sensors, everything, and didn't find a single violation. On paper it was clean, but my crew still tried to dodge that assignment. Guys would quietly trade lanes so they didn't have to stage at 8. The new hire, Luis, was what finally pushed me. He was a solid kid, no attitude, first week on nights. I put him on staging there, and the next morning he came to my office, twisting his badge lanyard, asking if he could move to another zone. He said every time he turned his back to wrap a pallet, he felt like someone was standing just beyond the stacks, watching. But the aisle was always empty when he checked. He stopped showing up 2 days later. By yesterday, I'd had enough of just logging incidents and telling people to focus. Same dock, same time window, different employees saying the same thing. I asked my assistant supervisor, Andre, to spend the whole shift with me at Dock 8. Andre's been in warehouses 15 years, ex-army, the kind of guy who calls everything user error until you put proof in his hands. If he said something felt off, I'd know it wasn't just tired people freaking themselves out. We dragged 2 folding chairs over by the main control panel where we could see the doors, the ramp, and the overflow pallets at the far end. Around 2:15 a.m., the air felt heavier. Andre asked if I'd turn the fans down and kept looking toward the stacks where the fluorescents flicker. At 2:30 on the dot, we both heard slow, steady footsteps on the metal ramp in the far corner. Clear, not building noise. Andre said he had a bad feeling and wanted to leave. I told him we'd stay together, check the ramp, then head back. And I grabbed 2 flashlights and we walked toward the sound. When we reached the ramp area, the footsteps stopped like someone had lifted their feet off the metal. The only thing I could hear was the distant conveyors and Andre's boots next to mine. We swept our flashlights over the dock plate, the bumpers, under the lip of the ramp. I unlocked the little dock office, flipped on the light, checked behind the desk, and even opened the cabinet where they keep vests and clipboards. It was all normal, boring even, which somehow made it worse. We walked the perimeter of Dock 8, then stepped into Dock 7 and back, in case sound was bouncing weird. Every door was shut, every truck slot empty, no stray pallets sitting crooked. Andre kept testing the metal with his boot, trying to get it to make that same rhythm. It just clanged once and went quiet. Finally, he shook his head and said, "Nah, something's wrong here, man. Let's go back to the panel." We turned and started walking away from the ramp. We'd only gone maybe 20 feet when it started again behind us. Same metal-on-metal sound, steady, heel then toe, like someone walking slow on the ramp we had just inspected. We both stopped at the same time and turned around. Nobody was there. Nothing moving. But the sound kept going for a few more steps before it cut off. Andre's face had gone tight and he said, very plain, "We shouldn't be back here. This isn't right." I'm supposed to be the one telling people to calm down and follow procedure, but in that moment, I didn't have a good speech. I just told him we'd treat it like a security issue, log it, and move closer to the main floor where more staff were working. We rolled our chairs out to the main aisle near the sorter, where I could still pull up Dock 8 on the screens. Andre usually likes to wander and joke with the forklift guys, but that night he stayed parked next to my station, radio clipped high on his vest. Around 2:40, I had Dock 8 full screen on my main monitor. The ramp, the closed door, the blue dock light, all of it just sitting there. At 2:47 exactly, the motion alert box popped up in the corner, loud enough to make Andre flinch. On the video, nothing changed. No movement, no shift in shadows, no truck pulling in, just an empty dock. I rewound 10 seconds, watched it again, then flipped to the second angle that covers the side walkway. Same thing. Empty metal, still chains, nothing there to trigger anything. Andre leaned in and watched over my shoulder for a full minute. "So that's it?" he said. "We hear it, sensor sees it, camera gets nothing?" I just nodded. We sat like that for a bit, staring at a quiet dock while normal warehouse noise went on behind us. Eventually, we had to get back to the usual checklist, and the rest of the shift ran like any other night, but both of us kept glancing at that corner of the building when we walked by. When day shift started rolling in, I waited until Jennifer was settled, then asked her to do a quick inventory spot check at Dock 8. I didn't mention any of the weird stuff, just said I needed counts on staged pallets and a look at the plate and restraints. She grabbed her tablet and headed out. 20 minutes later, she came back faster than usual, dropped the tablet on her desk, and rubbed her arms like she'd been standing in a cooler. She said inventory looked fine, but she really didn't like how it felt down there. I asked what felt meant, pretending I didn't know where she was going with it. She said it was like walking into a room where someone had just been arguing, even though nobody was around, and she kept wanting to finish faster and leave. Then she asked if there was a vent problem or some kind of chemical issue because the air felt heavy in that section. Only after she said that did I tell her about the night shift reports. Her face tightened when she realized she'd used almost the same words as everyone else. After that, I stopped treating it like just a weird story and started treating it like a problem I'd get blamed for if something worse happened. I put in work orders for electricians to test every circuit, sensor, and light from the panel to the dock face. They came out at night, climbed ladders, opened boxes, checked grounding, checked load. Maintenance rechecked the bay door hardware, the leveler, the ventilation above dock 8. IT confirmed the cameras and motion logs were clean, no glitches, no tampering. Everything came back working as designed. On paper, there was nothing wrong, but in reality, I had 5 different people, including myself, refusing to be alone in that one spot after midnight. I changed rotations so nobody was ever scheduled solo at Dock 8, started pairing people up, kept myself on the cameras during that 2:30 to 3 o'clock window, and on my days off, I went through old building records. The place used to be a grocery distribution center, and before that, another warehouse, with only standard inspections and 1 minor injury reported. Nothing that explained why a modern, well-lit dock in a busy facility would make grown adults feel like something was standing just outside the edge of what our cameras could see. I haven't taken this hire yet, because I know how it sounds, and I don't want to be the supervisor who spooked his own crew. But every night, right on schedule, that motion sensor at Dock 8 goes off. The screen shows an empty ramp and a closed door, and I sit there with my hand on the radio, pretending it's just a glitch while I wait to see if the sensor ever finally catches whatever keeps walking there. About 2 years ago, I was driving from Atlanta to Nashville for a wedding shoot. The trip usually took about 4 hours. I was 26, working as a freelance photographer, and I'd taken a last-minute wedding job. The rehearsal was the next afternoon, so I left Atlanta around 10 at night to drive straight through. 2 hours in, my gas light came on, and I pulled off at this tiny service station by the highway. It was almost empty, just one pump, a little convenience store, and an outside restroom on the side. While I was filling up, a beat-up sedan rolled to the other pump and died with a loud knock. A woman in her 30s stepped out looking exhausted, hair messy, hoodie half-zipped, flip-flops slapping the concrete. She kept scanning the lot and the dark road, and when our eyes met, she turned away fast. I finished pumping, locked my car, and went into the store to get coffee so I wouldn't start dozing. Inside, it was just me and an older guy behind the counter watching a tiny TV above the cigarettes. I grabbed a cup of burnt coffee and one of those sad-wrapped muffins and got in line. As I waited, the same woman walked in, grabbed the first bag of chips she saw, and stepped behind me. Up close, she smelled like smoke, and she kept shifting like she was ready to bolt. The cashier rang me up, glanced past me at her, then looked back at me and lowered his voice. "Be careful out there, son," he said. "Been some trouble around here lately." I asked what kind of trouble, and he just shrugged and said, "People up to no good." I paid, nodded, and walked back out into the cold air, feeling a little more awake than the coffee deserved. At my car, I set the cup in the holder, checked my camera bags in the back seat, and told myself to stop being paranoid. I'd been on enough late drives to know my brain liked to invent problems when I was tired. I had just clicked my seatbelt when there was a hard knock on my window that made me jump. It was her, standing inches from the glass, face washed out in the harsh light above the pump. I lowered the window a crack and asked, "Yeah?" "Excuse me," she said, voice shaky but controlled. "I know this is awkward, but could you give me a ride to the next town? My car won't start, And my phone is dead, she added, holding up a black screen like proof. I hesitated, because every instinct I had said this was how stories on the news started. At the same time, the lot was empty, the road was dark, and the idea of leaving her there sat wrong. The cashier's warning replayed in my head, but I kept thinking about my sister driving alone somewhere and needing help. After a few seconds, I unlocked the door and said, "Okay, just to the next town, that's it." She thanked me fast, almost tripping as she got in the passenger seat and pulled the door shut. Her faded canvas bag went on the floor by her feet, and she buckled her belt without looking at me. I pulled back onto the highway, letting the car settle at the speed limit while the radio murmured low. For the first 15 minutes, neither of us said much, just the occasional comment about the dark or the cold. Eventually, she cleared her throat and said, "I'm Angel," like she was forcing herself to remember basic manners. I told her my name was Greg, and that I was heading to Nashville to shoot a wedding. She just said, "Visiting my sister," when I asked where she was going, and then went quiet again. Looking back, I tried talking, and she answered short, her hand stuck on her bag strap. On a dark stretch, those headlights appeared close behind us and stayed there. "Isn't that your car?" I asked, and she snapped, "Drive faster, please, faster," then started digging in her bag frantically. The car behind us didn't back off. The sedan started catching up, then fell back, like whoever was driving was toying with the distance. A minute later, they surged forward and snapped their high beams on, blasting the inside of my car with white light. I swore and squinted at the road. Beside me, Angel let out this sharp sound and yanked her bag into her lap. She pulled out her phone in one fast motion and started jabbing at the screen. The phone lit up. Not dead at all. I remember saying, "I thought your phone was dead." But she was already pressing it to her ear. "It's me," she said as soon as someone picked up. Her voice was tight. "He found me." "Yes, I'm with some guy who gave me a ride." "No, I don't know him. He's just driving. We're on Highway 65, near the Franklin sign. Please just..." She stopped, listening, staring straight ahead. I kept glancing between the road and the mirror. The sedan had closed the gap so much I couldn't even see its hood anymore. Just those headlights eating my rear window. I snapped, "What is going on?" "Who is that?" Angel just pressed the phone harder to her ear and said, "Just drive, don't stop, please don't stop," like she was talking to both of us. The sedan lunged closer and clipped toward the left, bumping into my lane. They weren't just tailgating, they were trying to push my angle. I felt the car drift toward the shoulder and I jerked the wheel back, heart pounding. "He's trying to run us off," I said, mostly to myself. Angel finally looked at me and whispered, "Please, just don't let him stop us." I normally drive like a cautious old man because my gear is expensive and my insurance sucks, but right then none of that mattered. I pressed the accelerator down until the engine groaned and we shot forward. My crossover wasn't exactly a race car, but it was newer than that old sedan and responded fast. The speedometer climbed. The other car tried to stay with us, but I started putting some space between us. The high beams got a little smaller in the mirror, then flared again as he pushed it. Angel's phone was still against her ear. I heard her say, "I can't. We're still moving. There's nowhere to pull over. He's right behind us." And then, "Yes, I see it. I see it." In this shaky rush. Up ahead, through the dark, I saw lights that weren't headlights. A roadside diner sign, and in front of it, clear as day, the reflective pattern of a police car parked near the entrance. I didn't think about it too hard. I flipped my blinker on out of habit even though no one cared about turn signals at that speed, and cut across into the exit lane a little sharper than I should have. The tires squealed as we hit the ramp. The sedan followed for a second, then hung back like the driver was trying to decide. I rode the curve, saw the diner, the patrol car, and two uniformed officers standing near the door drinking coffee. I swerved in sharply, pulling into the lot faster than was smart, and slammed on the brakes near the cruiser. Angel had her hand on the door handle before we'd fully stopped. As soon as the car jerked to a halt, she flung the door open, stumbled out, and ran straight toward the cops, yelling something I couldn't hear through the closed window. I watched the sedan slow at the parking lot entrance. For a second, I thought the driver was going to pull in after us, but they sat there, idling, blinkers off. Then they turned, made a wide U-turn, and disappeared back toward the highway. One of the officers put his hand on Angel's shoulder to steady her while the other started walking toward me, expression serious, hand resting on his belt. I rolled my window down, both hands visible on the steering wheel because I've shot enough events with security around to know they like that. Angel was talking a mile a minute, pointing between me and the road, and every now and then glancing back to make sure the sedan was really gone. The officer at my window asked for my license and registration, then calmly told me to step out so they could get two separate stories. We ended up inside the diner, sitting in a booth under harsh fluorescent lights while the officers took our statements. That's when I finally got the full explanation. Angel told them she'd filed a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend 3 weeks earlier after he started showing up at her job and her apartment, sending threatening messages. All of it. He hadn't taken the hint and had been stalking her, following her car, circling her building at night. She decided to go stay with her sister for a while and thought leaving late at night would be safer. Instead, he must have followed her or already been waiting in that area. When she pulled into the gas station and saw his sedan, she panicked. Her car wasn't broken at all. She admitted that pretty quickly, eyes on the tabletop. She said she'd seen him drive past the station twice and didn't want to get back on the highway alone. She didn't trust the cashier to step in if things went bad, and she didn't have anyone close by she could call to come get her. So when she saw me, younger guy with out-of-state plates and camera gear, she figured I was less likely to be connected to her ex and might actually take her away from there. She lied about the phone being dead because she didn't want to freak me out and risk me saying no. The person she'd called in my car was actually her sister, who had already been in contact with local police about the restraining order. I was pissed about being dragged into it, and I didn't hide that. I told the officer that if I'd known there was an active stalker situation, I would have called the cops from the gas station and made Angel stay there instead of playing getaway driver on a dark highway. Still, I answered every question, walked them through the whole timeline, even described the sedan as best I could. They sent a patrol out to look for the car, but he was long gone by then. Eventually, they let me leave with a case number and assurance that detectives would follow up. 2 days later, I got a call from one of the officers. They'd arrested the ex-boyfriend after he was spotted circling Angel's sister's neighborhood. The sedan matched my description. Angel was safe, staying somewhere else with family. The cop thanked me for helping, even though I'd mostly just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. After that, I made a quiet rule for myself. No more hitchhikers, no more quick rides, no more exceptions because someone looks desperate. I still feel a little used when I think about how she left out the most important part of the story, but I also get why she did it. She was trying to survive. The part that sticks with me is how easy it was for my normal drive to turn into someone else's escape route, and how fast you can end up in danger just by agreeing to help a stranger. Back in June 2018, when I was 26, I signed up on Discord after a friend invited me to a shared server about RPG games. At that point, Discord was just another app to me, somewhere to talk about loot and raid times after work. The server was pretty friendly. People arguing about builds, sharing memes, hopping into voice to grind dungeons. That's where I met Shadow Knight 92. No avatar, just the default Discord icon. He jumped into a thread where I was whining about a broken Quest and started giving really detailed advice, like he'd already min-maxed the whole thing. Later that night, we ended up in a voice channel together, and he introduced himself as Damien, 32, graphic designer from another state. His mic was a bit crackly, but he had this dry sense of humor that clicked with mine. He made fun of my aim. I made fun of his edgy username, and it just worked. For the first few months, it was honestly fun. We played co-op a few nights a week, then almost every night. The conversations drifted from games to work, then to random life stuff. He'd complain about nightmare clients and late invoices. I'd complain about legacy code and my team lead. We swapped links, dumb videos, inside jokes. When someone on the server asked why he never used an avatar, he just said he didn't like having personal photos online. I got that. I only had a couple of old group pics on my profile. By the end of summer, it was normal for us to DM every day. Sometimes we'd be on call for hours while grinding. He asked about my family, exes, what I wanted long-term. It felt like one of those online friendships that just forms out of nowhere and becomes part of your routine. Looking back, there were tiny things that were a bit off. He'd get quiet if I muted to talk to roommates, or he'd DM me if I joined a different voice channel. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. Somewhere around October, the tone changed. I started waking up to walls of text from him sent at 3 or 4 in the morning. Stuff about how he felt a real connection with me, how I was the only person who understood him, how everyone else just used him. Mixed in were mentions of a breakup and problems at his agency, so I assumed he was just going through a rough patch. I'd reply in the morning like, "Damn man, that sucks," and he'd say he was feeling better because he'd talked to me, even though it was just him dumping into my DMs while I was asleep. Then he got demanding. If I didn't answer within a few minutes, I'd get, "You there?" Then, "Guess not." Then, "Nice to know where I stand." If I was online but talking in the public channels, he'd DM, "So you can type there but not to me?" One evening I went out with coworkers and didn't log in at all. The next morning there were dozens of messages, asking where I'd been, who I was with, why I hadn't told him I was going out, mixed with lines about everyone abandoning him. I tried to set boundaries like a normal adult. I told him straight that I liked talking, but I had a job, friends, a life outside Discord, and I couldn't reply instantly every time. He flipped. Not in all caps, but these long paragraphs about how he'd given everything to our friendship, how he stayed up late so I'd have someone to talk to, how I was ungrateful and just like his ex. Then he swung back, apologizing, blaming stress, saying I meant the world to him and he'd back off. 2 days later, he repeated the same pattern. I started logging in less, partly because I was busy, partly because seeing his name pop up gave me this knot in my stomach. When I muted the DM thread for a while, he noticed. He wrote that Discord must be bugged because his messages weren't showing as read, then started sending after his own texts. It felt like he was watching my online status way more than a random gaming buddy should. Around this same time, a new member called Void Walker joined the server. He said his name was Tyler, 29, worked in IT, had just moved closer to the coast. He hung out in the tech channel a lot, answering questions about servers and deployment. We started talking in DMs after he helped me with an API problem. I told him I was a junior dev. He said he handled back-end stuff and some DevOps. Compared to Damien, chatting with Tyler felt relaxed. We mostly talked code and projects. He sent screenshots of his work, snippets of scripts, and pointed out small improvements I could make in mine. It all looked legit. After a couple of weeks, though, he started mixing in personal questions. Nothing crazy, just, "So what city are you in? You work remote or office? You live alone? Got a girlfriend?" I answered, but kept it vague on purpose. just my city, mid-size company. I rent with someone, that sort of thing. One evening he messaged that he'd finally taken a decent new photo and wanted an opinion. A minute later he sent a selfie. Hoodie, headset, kind of generic IT guy look. I told him it was fine, maybe a bit dark, and he joked that he hated cameras anyway. Later that night I got curious and searched his username on a couple of sites. It didn't take long to find an older profile that clearly belonged to him. Same handle, same jokes, same games. There were a few tagged photos on that old account, supposedly of Tyler. The guy in those pictures looked nothing like the guy in the new selfie. Different face, different build. Even the hairline was off. I flipped between them for a while, trying to tell myself it was angles or age, but it didn't line up. I thought about asking him, then decided I was probably overthinking it, or the old photos weren't actually him. I closed everything and went back to Discord. I didn't raise the issue, thinking maybe the photos were just old. Then Tyler started sending weird sexual messages. He went from joking around to telling me we fit together perfectly, that we were meant to meet, that he wanted to show me real life. At first, I tried to laugh it off and change the subject back to games or code, but he kept dragging it back to us, to how he felt when we talked, how he couldn't stop thinking about me and how no one else understands me like you do. He started saying he had connections at big IT companies, that he could help with my career if I came to visit him for a weekend. He framed it like networking at first, but in the same breath he'd talk about sharing a hotel room and not wasting the chance to really connect. He sent links to expensive hotels and restaurants near where he said he lived, insisting he'd pay for everything, that I just had to show up and let things happen. I told him I wasn't interested in that kind of meetup, that if we ever met, it would be with a group from the server, in public. The more I tried to keep it friendly and distant, the more intrusive his messages got. He started sending long late-night paragraphs describing exactly what we would do in that hotel room, what he wanted from me. I began putting off opening his DMs because my stomach dropped when I saw his name. When I finally replied, I kept it short. I told him I didn't want that. I wasn't comfortable, and he needed to stop. That was when the helpful version of Tyler disappeared. He snapped, said I was just using him, that I loved the attention but refused to give anything back, that I'd stay stuck and ungrateful forever. A few days later, during my lunch break, I opened Discord and saw a new message from him with a screenshot. It was my LinkedIn profile with my full name, job title, and the company I worked for. Under it, he typed, "I know where you work. It's easy to find out the rest too." I blocked him on Discord right away, then saw new accounts with random names, but his same typing style sliding into my DMs, some apologizing, some angry, all pushing me to answer while I just kept blocking and he kept writing. Damien didn't back off while all this with Tyler was happening. He somehow found out there was a problem, probably from seeing parts of it in the server chat. At first, he acted protective, calling Tyler a psycho and saying I should have told him sooner. But then his messages changed. He started saying, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him." And, "I've got friends in law enforcement. I can find anyone." He kept repeating that he could make Tyler disappear from your life if I just trusted him. And at some point, it stopped sounding like support and started sounding like a threat. I told him I didn't want anyone taken care of, that I just wanted both of them gone. And sitting there watching those messages stack up made me realize how stuck I was between someone trying to control me emotionally and someone who had already pushed into my real life. I deleted my Discord account, left the server, blocked the phone numbers they'd somehow gotten, and for months afterward, strange emails from throwaway addresses kept asking me to come back to communicating. But I ignored all of them, and now I'm much more careful with online acquaintances and never share personal information with people I don't know in person. even though the fear that one of them might still find me in real life comes back sometimes. Two years ago, when I was 22, urban exploration was the only thing that pulled me out of studio all-nighters. When I was in architecture school, me and some friends started sneaking into abandoned buildings and photographing them for our portfolios. It felt half like homework, half like doing something illegal. That evening there were 4 of us. Me, my roommate Ethan, his girlfriend Rachel, and our classmate Alex. We thought we knew what we were doing that night out there. We'd found a post online about an old textile factory on the city outskirts, supposedly closed for about 20 years. For us, that meant original room layouts, untouched machinery, and good shots for our class projects. We drove out around sunset and parked down the road so the car wouldn't be obvious. By the time we walked up, there was still enough light to circle the building, check for cameras, and listen for any activity. The place was 3 stories tall, broken windows in rows, graffiti everywhere, but no fresh locks or security signs anywhere. It looked forgotten from outside. A section of fence along the side had already been pushed down, so we slipped through there without touching the main gate. On that same side, we found a service entrance with a padlock hanging open, chain already cut and rusted. Ethan shoved the metal door with his shoulder until it scraped over debris and swung in. We went inside with our flashlights on low, Rachel filming us like some behind-the-scenes clip for class. The first floor was trash, old crates, rusted equipment, but the long corridors and big halls were still easy to read. It was perfect for us. We spent about an hour on that level, photographing corridors, doorways, and old signage, moving in a loop so we always ended back near the main stair. Rachel kept swapping between stills and video, already planning edits in her head. At one point, Alex said we should check the 3rd floor, because he'd read somewhere that the machines up there were better preserved. Ethan liked the idea of a higher vantage point, so we all agreed. We took a narrow metal staircase that creaked under us, but held as we climbed toward the darkness. We passed the 2nd floor, uninterested. The 3rd floor felt different right away. Most of the windows were boarded from the inside, so even though it wasn't fully dark outside, it was dim enough that our flashlights became the only real light. Their beams jumped over columns and dust, and finally settled on rows of old weaving machines at the far end of a wide hall. Rachel started filming, walking between them and talking softly to the camera. Ethan and I spread out toward the edges, checking the floor. Alex stayed near the staircase with his phone, saying his asthma was bothering him more than usual. We were maybe 10 minutes into shooting when a loud metallic clang came from the floor below us. It sounded like somebody dropped a heavy piece of metal or slammed a thick door shut. The noise came straight up the stairwell, and all 4 of us froze. Rachel stopped talking mid-sentence. Ethan swung his flashlight toward the stair opening, then shut it off fast like he regretted drawing attention. "What was that?" Rachel whispered. Ethan moved closer to me and said it could be a homeless person, or maybe a security guard checking the building. His voice sounded thinner now. We killed our flashlights and stood still, listening. Heavy, slow footsteps came from below, crossed the floor, then started up the metal stairs. They turned into a steady rhythm, boots climbing toward the 2nd level. We looked at each other. The stair we'd used was the only way down. The outside fire escape had looked rusted and useless. Rachel whispered that we should go now, while whoever it was stayed on the 2nd floor. We started toward the stair, moving fast but trying not to make noise. Alex waited at the top, over the railing. He jerked toward us, pointed down, and I saw their beam and someone below, looking up, faceless. We backed away deeper into the hall and dropped behind a row of old machines. Nobody said anything, We just moved at the same time, like it was the only option. There was a low gap under the frames, enough to lie flat and still see thin strips of the hull between the bases. My chest was tight, heart pounding so hard I honestly thought he'd be able to hear it. The footsteps hit the top of the stairs, metal first, then shifted as he stepped onto our floor. A flashlight clicked on and slid across the ceiling and walls in slow, careful sweeps. We pressed ourselves into the floor, trying to make our bodies as flat as possible. Rachel was in front of me. I could hear her breathing too fast, then forcing each breath quieter. To my left, Ethan breathed, "Don't move," barely more than air. The beam crossed the machines, the columns, the trash piles, then came back like he was working in lines. It didn't feel random. It felt like a search pattern. Then he spoke, somewhere off to our right, and the sound hit way harder than I expected. "I know you're here," he called, voice raspy and flat. "Better come out yourselves." It didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a warning that there was a worse plan if we didn't. Rachel grabbed my hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. Her palm was freezing. We stayed completely still. He walked the hall for what felt like a long time, shoes scraping on debris, light cutting into corners and between machines. At one point the beam slid just over our heads, and I shut my eyes even though it changed nothing. Finally, his steps moved away from us, toward the far end where we'd seen a boarded door that led to a storage room. We heard him stop there, the beam stay in one place, wood creaking as he pulled at the boards and rattled the handle like he was trying to force it. For the first time, his focus was clearly off the middle of the hall. Ethan twisted his head toward us and made quick gestures, pointed at the stairs, tapped his wrist like a watch, then pushed his hand forward. Now or never. I nodded, felt Rachel's hand slip out of mine as she got ready, and watched Alex, closest to the stairs, swallow and start to move with us, even though he still looked confused. We slid out from behind the machines, staying low and moving toward the stairs in a crooked line. Every scrape of a shoe sounded huge to me, but the noise of him fighting the door covered most of it. Ethan reached the opening first and put his foot on the metal step, testing it. Rachel slipped in behind him, and I grabbed the rail, ready to start down. Behind me, Alex's foot caught a rusted pipe lying across the floor. He went down hard, the pipe rolled, and it hit metal with a sharp crash that rang through the whole hall. The noise by the storage door stopped dead, and the flashlight beam whipped around straight at us. It lit Rachel's shoulder and Ethan's hand on the rail for a split second before Ethan yelled, "Go!" And we stopped pretending to be quiet. We ran down the stairs, feet slamming the metal, one hand on the rail so we wouldn't fall. Behind us, he shouted something angry, and the heavy thud of his boots hit the steps as he started after us. We blew past the second-floor landing without even looking, just kept going down. Ethan hit the bottom first, slammed the ground floor door open, and we sprinted across the trash and crates toward the service entrance. We burst out through the same side door, ran along the wall, through the gap in the fence, and down the block to the car. We scrambled in, doors slamming, and Ethan's hands shook on the keys so bad he dropped them once before getting the engine started. We drove until the warehouse was completely out of sight. Only then did he pull over so we could breathe and actually think. We called the police from the car, talking over each other until Ethan took the phone and explained what happened. A patrol went out there. Later, an officer called back and said they hadn't found anyone, just signs the place was being used, probably by dealers or homeless people. He told us we were lucky we hadn't been cornered and said to stay out of places like that. A few days later, we sat down after class and went over everything, and that's when Alex admitted he hadn't heard the first clang or the footsteps at all. He'd had his earbuds in on the third floor, listening to music while we were creeping around in full panic mode. He said he only pulled one out when we suddenly started moving for the stairs, and still thought we were just ready to leave until he saw our faces and heard the guy yelling behind us. We still don't know if that man wanted to scare us off, or if it would have turned into something worse if he'd reached us. But that night was enough for me. I haven't done any urban exploration since, and when people in my program talk about abandoned buildings now, I'm the one telling them to remember they might not be empty at all. The guy who opened the door was breathing so hard it was like he'd just run a marathon, even though I'd brought the pizza in the standard 20 minutes. But I'll go back to the start of that shift. I'm a food delivery driver, 4 years on evenings for the same small Italian place, usually from 6 to midnight. That night had been typical, apartments and regulars, until around 9 when my boss called my cell with a new order. 3 large pizzas were going to an office building in the business district, paid online with a decent tip already added. The address made me pause because at that hour those offices are usually dark, cleaners gone, doors locked. I repeated it back, asked if he was sure, and he just said the guy sounded hungry and to quit overthinking it. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the business quarter, which looked almost dead at that time of night. The building I needed was a plain 3-story block of gray brick wedged between taller glass ones, with lights on and a few second-floor windows. I parked by the entrance, grabbed the insulated bag with the 3 boxes, and tried the glass door, expecting it to be locked. The handle turned easily, and I stepped into a narrow lobby with only a staircase. I went up to the second floor, listening to my own footsteps in the quiet hallway, noticing a few office doors slightly ajar and no other sounds at all. Suite 203 was at the end of the hall on the left, its door closed with a thin strip of light showing at the bottom. I shifted the bag in my hands, knocked, and heard a young male voice from inside tell me to come in. When I opened the door, I saw one big room with desks along the walls and a guy of about 25 standing near the window desk. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled, no tie, and he kept glancing at the dark window like he was watching for someone down on the street. Up close, he looked sweaty and jittery, chest rising and falling like he'd just run up the stairs even though I hadn't taken long. I told him I had 3 pizzas for his company name, read the amount, and he nodded quickly without even looking at the boxes. He said he'd left his wallet in the next room, pointed at an internal door off to the side, and told me to wait here a minute. Then he slipped through that door and shut it behind him, firm enough that I knew he didn't want me following. Left alone, I set the bag on a clear corner of a desk and let my eyes move around the office. Open folders and loose papers were spread across most of the desks, like someone had been searching through them in a hurry and just walked away. A couple of computers were still on with screensavers bouncing. Coffee cups sat half full, but there was no keyboard tapping, no other voices, nothing. After maybe a minute of silence, I heard fast footsteps coming down the hall toward 203, heavier than the younger guys and not slowing near the door. The door flew open and a different man stepped in, older, maybe early 40s, in a dark suit with his tie loosened like he'd left a long meeting. He stopped when he saw me in my delivery jacket, looked at the pizza bag, and his face tightened from confusion into straight irritation. "Who let you in here?" he asked, short and sharp, like I was trespassing instead of standing there with his dinner. I held up the receipt, explained about the online order to this address, mentioned the company name, and said a younger guy had just gone to get cash. The man in the suit stared at the receipt for a second, shook his head, and said no one here had ordered anything and that I needed to leave immediately. Before I could apologize and back out, the internal door opened and the younger guy stepped back into the office, then froze when he saw the older man. For a couple of seconds, nobody spoke. They just stared at each other, and the younger one's eyes dropped straight to the floor like a kid caught stealing. The man in the suit walked over to him, said something low and angry that I couldn't catch, and the kid flinched without looking up. Then the older man turned back to me with this fixed, polite expression that didn't match his eyes and told me to leave the pizzas on the desk and wait here. He said it like an order, not a request, and every part of me started insisting the whole situation was wrong and I should just get out. I said I could cancel the order and take the food back to the restaurant, but he shifted to stand between me and the door. In that moment, from somewhere deeper in the suite, I heard a heavy metal clunk and slow grinding, like a big safe being unlocked and swung open. Instinct told me to get out of there right away. My stomach dropped, and I did not argue with it. I spun away from the man in the suit, not toward the hallway like he probably expected, but toward the internal door the younger guy had used. Chairs scraped behind me, someone shouted, and fingers caught the back of my jacket for a second as I lunged forward. I yanked the handle, threw my shoulder into the door, and the pizza boxes slipped from my arms. They hit the floor with a dull smack and slid somewhere behind me, but I did not stop. I squeezed through the gap and slammed the door as hard as I could, more to slow them down than anything else. The room I ran into was wider, with desks pushed against the walls. Along the far side stood a big open safe, packed tight with folders and small boxes. Right beside it was a woman around 30, business clothes, a large handbag hooked over her arm, and her other hand still half inside the safe. She froze when she saw me. We just stared at each other for a second. Her mouth opened like she wanted to explain, but I was already moving again. I did not ask questions. Whatever this was, I wanted out. In the corner near the safe, I saw a metal door with a push bar, the kind used for an emergency exit. That was all I needed. I cut across the room, keeping a table between me and her, expecting her to yell or grab me, but she only turned her head toward the office I had come from, listening. Behind me, the inner door rattled hard, and someone cursed when it did not open right away. My shoe slid on a loose sheet of paper, and I nearly went down, but I caught myself and hit the bar on the metal door with my shoulder. No alarm sounded. For some reason that scared me more. Either it was broken or they had turned it off. The door flew open into a plain service corridor. I did not slow down. I ran straight, followed the turn toward what I guessed was the main staircase, then shoved through another door and hit the stairs 2 at a time. Behind me, I heard more doors slam, footsteps on concrete, and a man yelling, but I did not look back. My legs burned and my chest hurt, but I kept going until I reached the lobby. I pushed the front door open with my elbow and stumbled out onto the street. The night air hit me and I headed straight for my car. I unlocked it, dropped into the seat, and locked the doors again without even thinking. My hands shook when I tried to start the engine, but it turned over, and I pulled away from the curb. I kept my speed normal, forced myself to use my signal, checked the mirrors to see if anyone was following. The sidewalk behind me stayed empty, the gray brick building shrinking in the rear view. After a few blocks, I turned randomly a couple of times, then finally pulled over on a quieter street and put the car in park. I sat there for maybe half a minute, breathing hard, before grabbing my phone. I thought about calling my boss, then saw that open safe again in my head and went straight to 911. I told the dispatcher my name, that I was a delivery driver, and that I thought I had just walked into some kind of robbery at an office in the business district. She asked for the address, and I read it off from the last ticket, then described the building, 2nd floor, open doors, 3 people inside. She told me to stay in the car, keep the doors locked, and wait for officers. A patrol car pulled in behind me not long after. 2 officers got out and approached slowly. One stood a little off to the side, watching the street, while the other tapped the window and asked my name. I stepped out when they told me to, showed them the delivery app with the order, and walked them through everything from the call about the pizza to me running through the emergency exit. They wrote it all down, asked if I had seen any weapons or if anyone had actually put hands on me. I said no, but told them about the safe full of folders and boxes, and how the younger guy and the woman seemed scared of the man in the suit. One officer stayed with me going over small details, things like how the offices looked and where the safe room door was, while the other went back to the patrol car and talked on the radio. A few minutes later, more cars drove past in the direction of the offices, lights on but sirens off. They had me sit in the back seat of their car so detectives could find me easier. They let me call my boss and tell him I was with the police because of a problem with a delivery. He swore a bit, then settled down and told me to cooperate and come back when I was done. By the time they finally drove me to the station for a signed statement, they already had most of the story. The detective said the younger guy worked in accounting at that company and had used his keys and access to get in after hours with his two friends. The plan was to clean out the safe, take cash and sensitive documents, and disappear. The pizza order was just a cover, so if someone saw lights or movement that late, they would think employees were working overtime and ordered food. When the police entered the building, they found all three of them still inside, the safe open, bags half packed with folders and cash boxes, and my crushed pizzas on the floor. My boss later offered me a couple days off and called me lucky, but I went back the next night anyway. Now, when I walk into any building, I listen to my gut faster, and I always note the exits before I let a door close behind me. My first real job after college was night security at a chemical company warehouse complex in an industrial zone. The property was big, 5 storage buildings, an office, and a parking lot, all surrounded by a tall fence with barbed wire on top. There was only one main entrance with a guard booth. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Honestly, the work was boring. I sat in the booth, drove around once an hour on a golf cart, checked doors, signed in the occasional truck. The warehouses stored paints, solvents, and other chemicals, so security mattered. Usually nothing happened and I mostly read books or watched shows on my tablet. For somebody 22 and broke, it was easy money. I still tried to be the serious guard. I'm small, not exactly intimidating, so I made up for it by following every procedure. Check the chain on the gate, log plates, don't miss patrol times. My supervisor Ron told me during training, if something happens, they look at the guard first. That stuck. I kept my radio on my belt, flashlight in its holder, incident log open on the desk. The company handgun stayed locked in the safe under the counter. We were only allowed to take it out if a manager gave direct permission, which in 6 months had never happened. My biggest problems were raccoons in the dumpster and bored truckers asking if they could nap in the lot. The buildings were numbered in a loop, 1 by the gate and 5-way in the back by the far corner of the fence, where our property backed up to more factories and some empty dirt lots. That corner always felt different. The floodlight over Warehouse 5 flickered constantly or just went out, and maintenance kept saying they were waiting on a part. On patrol, driving past that dark patch, I'd always feel myself sit up a little straighter. I'd slow the cart, sweep the area with my light, then tell myself I was being paranoid and keep going. Nothing ever showed on the cameras, just stray cats and raccoons by the dumpster. By late September, I had the routine down so well I didn't have to think about it. Coffee at 9:30, clock in at 10, first patrol at 11. Second shift would roll out by midnight and it would just be me and Mike, the other guard, who stayed near the office building. We'd check in with each other on the radio every now and then, mostly dumb jokes to stay awake. The quiet became normal. When people asked if anything crazy ever happened out there, I'd shrug and say no, not really. On a Wednesday night in late September around 2 a.m., I was doing my hourly patrol. No trucks were scheduled, and the lot was empty. I was driving the usual route, half on autopilot. When I came around the side of Warehouse 5, right by that dark corner of the fence, I saw a shape near the loading dock. At first, I thought it was just the usual stack of pallets throwing a weird shadow, but then it moved, stepping out away from the dock. I let off the accelerator and rolled to a stop in the golf cart. For a second, I just watched. The figure was crouched by the dock door like he was checking something on the ground. Every door on my last patrol had been locked. Nobody should have been on site. I picked up my flashlight, thumbed it on, and aimed the beam right at him. The light caught him, and he turned toward me. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, work coveralls and a baseball cap pulled low. The coveralls were covered in red stains, big irregular patches across the front and down the sleeves, like he'd been splashed with something and let it dry there. The company had red-tinted primer and drums, but nobody was supposed to be working with it at night, and even if they were, they'd come through the gate and sign in. I hadn't logged anyone. I felt my stomach drop. I raised my voice. "Hey, how'd you get in here?" I yelled across the dock. He stared at me for a beat. Even in the flashlight beam, I couldn't make out his eyes, just the shadow under the brim. He didn't answer. He turned away and started walking along the side of Warehouse 5 toward the fence, like I was just some noise he could ignore. Any normal employee would have yelled something back, held up their hands, tried to explain. This guy just moved faster. I slid the golf cart back into gear and followed him, keeping about 30 feet of space. The gravel sounded too loud under the tires. I kept the flashlight on his back. "Stop! I need to see your ID," I called out. The man sped up, almost jogging now, shoulders hunched. That killed whatever hope I had that this was some stupid miscommunication. My heart was racing, but my brain felt very calm in that way it does when you know there's no one else to hand this off to. I grabbed my radio with my free hand. "Mike, got an intruder by Warehouse 5, heading toward the west fence. Get over here," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. There was a quick crackle and his "Copy, on my way," in my ear. Ahead of me, the man reached the fence line. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the chain link, put his boot on the metal runner, and started climbing. We were talking a 10-foot fence with barbed wire on top, and he moved like it was nothing, hand over hand, fast and practiced. I cursed under my breath and pushed the accelerator, but he was already halfway up. By the time I brought the cart to a stop and stepped out, he was at the top of the fence. I saw his coveralls snag on the barbed wire, his body jerk, and then he hauled himself over anyway. He swung one leg, then the other, cleared the top, and dropped down hard on the other side. He staggered once, caught his balance, then ran toward the neighboring industrial lots without looking back. I stopped at the fence, one hand on the cold metal, and shined my flashlight after him. Past our fence, there were only a few scattered security lights from other properties. In between was just black. I watched for any movement, any shape, but he was just gone. Company policy said we weren't supposed to leave property, and I wasn't about to chase a bleeding stranger through dark alleys by myself. Mike's golf cart engine echoed before I saw him. He pulled up beside me a minute later, breath a little loud in the quiet as he climbed out. "Where'd he go?" he asked. "Out that way," I said, still staring into the dark. "He's gone." We both lifted our flashlights to the top of the fence where the guy had gone over. The beam washed over the barbed wire. There were pieces of fabric from his coveralls stuck on the barbed wire and some blood. We both stared at the fabric for a second. Seeing the blood made it click that this wasn't just some idiot cutting through the lot. Mike swore and stepped back from the fence. I kept my light on the wire until he said, "We gotta call this in." And that finally snapped me out of it. Back at the carts, I radioed the main line and reported an intruder who'd climbed the fence and left blood on the barbed wire. While Mike called our supervisor, I dialed the non-emergency police number like we'd been trained. As soon as I mentioned blood and that the guy had fled on foot, the dispatcher said officers would respond and told us to secure the area and not touch anything. We drove up to the front together and waited at the booth, both of us running through policy in our heads instead of joking like usual. About 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up. I buzzed them in, pointed them toward Warehouse 5, and walked them through where I'd seen the guy and the route he took. After that, they had us hang back while they did a sweep. Watching them walk the grounds with their flashlights, checking doors I'd checked an hour before, made the whole property suddenly feel less under my control. They tested every warehouse door and loading dock. Everything was locked. No pried locks. No broken glass. Nothing. One of the officers called us over to the loading dock. In the dirt and gravel were clear boot prints. They started at a section of fence further down, went straight up to the dock, then straight back to the same spot on the fence. One set in, one set out. It lined up exactly with when I'd seen him. He hadn't been wandering. He'd come over, done whatever he planned to do, and then left in a hurry when I showed up. They had me go through my story again. Time, patrol route, distance, what he looked like. When I mentioned the red stains on his coveralls, the older officer paused, looked at his partner for half a second, and then asked, "Red like paint? Or red like blood?" I said it looked like paint, but it covered most of the front. He wrote that down, said okay, and moved on. They didn't explain the look they'd shared, so I just kept answering what they asked. Our supervisor, Ron, arrived about an hour after the first call. He looked like he'd come straight from bed, but his voice was all business. He talked with the officers, checked the fence himself, then sat Mike and me down in the office and told us to write detailed reports while it was fresh. No phones, no side conversations, just every detail we could remember. My hand shook while I wrote out the times. After the paperwork and more questions, Ron said there would be no more solo patrols that night. 1 cart, 2 guards, stay in radio contact with him. That was fine with me. The idea of driving past Warehouse 5 alone again made me feel kind of sick. So we did the last rounds together, double-checking doors we knew were locked, lights bouncing off the same empty walls. We didn't see anyone else. On paper, it was just an unknown trespasser who'd already gone. But now I knew the fence wasn't as much of a barrier as I'd thought. I went home at 6, locked my apartment door, and more or less stared at the ceiling until my phone rang that afternoon. It was Ron. He asked if I had a minute to talk about last night's incident, and sounded more serious than I'd ever heard him. I sat down at my tiny kitchen table and said yeah. He told me the police had already followed up. They'd taken blood from the fence and matched it to blood from another scene. Between that and the description of the man's clothes, they believed our trespasser was the suspect in an armed robbery at an art supply store a few miles away. A few hours before my shift, a man had walked in near closing, pulled a gun on the clerk, and forced them to empty the register and the safe. On his way out, he'd knocked over several cans of red paint and basically soaked himself in it. Then he ran. Police had been searching for him all night. Street cameras caught him running in the direction of the industrial zone, then losing him once he got off the main roads. Based on the boot prints, the blood, and the paint I described on his coveralls, they thought he'd climbed onto our property to lay low until patrol cars stopped swarming the area. When I came around on patrol and hit him with my flashlight, he made the decision to bolt and take his chances with the fence instead of dealing with me. Ron said they found him the next day at a motel off the highway outside the city. Staff had called about a nervous guy with red-stained clothes and a lot of cash. Officers showed up, and it was the same man from the store footage. Hearing Ron say, He was armed during the robbery. Made my stomach drop in a way it hadn't the whole night before. I'd spent hours thinking about the blood on the wire without really letting the word gun land. After I hung up, I just sat there, thinking about how I'd followed him in that golf cart, how I'd yelled at him to stop and show ID like it was any other policy thing. If I'd tried to block him in or decided to get closer, or if he'd chosen not to run and turned around with that gun instead, there's a good chance I wouldn't be here writing this. I still work security, but I don't treat the job like easy money anymore, because that night didn't come down to training or courage. It came down to the fact that a cornered armed guy decided I wasn't worth shooting, and my life basically hinged on that choice. Way back in October of last year, I was working as an analyst at a small consulting firm in Seattle. Our office was on the 4th floor of an old business center with about 20 different companies. I was 27 then, an ordinary office guy who spent most days buried in spreadsheets and emails. I usually got there around 9, but that day I came an hour early to finish a quarterly report before a client meeting. It was around 8, still dim outside, and the building felt empty, just the guard downstairs and a couple of early people. I went up to my floor and into the open area where our desks were. Our whole company fit into one large room with low partitions and a glass door to the hallway. No one else from my team was there yet. I turned on my computer, hit the switch on the coffee maker, and opened the report. For a few minutes it felt nice having the place to myself. No phones ringing, no coworkers talking. Then the quiet started to feel heavy. Every sound from the corridor, the elevator ding, pipes clicking, made me look up for a second. Around 8:30, I heard our office door open. In that quiet, it sounded louder than usual. I looked up, about to crack a joke if it was my manager, and instead saw a guy in a courier uniform from one of the big delivery services. Mid-30s, blue shirt, cap with the logo, tablet in his hand, small cardboard box under his arm. He stepped inside a little and said, "Morning. Does a James Hartford work here?" I turned my chair toward him and told him no. We didn't have anyone with that name in our company at all. He frowned a little and looked down at his tablet, tapping the screen with his thumb. Then he read out the address and suite number, and it matched ours exactly. He checked the number on the door like he thought I was joking. I told him we were a consulting firm, and maybe he needed one of the other offices on the floor. There were 4 companies on that level, ours and 3 neighbors. I offered to walk with him to the list of tenants by the elevator. He agreed, and we stepped into the corridor together to check it. We went through the printed list, name by name. There was no Hartford anywhere. He stared at the paper for a few seconds longer than he needed to, then said he would try the other doors anyway. He thanked me and walked down the hallway toward the corner. I watched him slow near the fire stairs, then went back into our office. The door clicked shut behind me and I tried to forget about it and focus on my report again. Maybe 5 minutes later I heard the same door open, the same loud sound in the quiet room suddenly. It was the same courier, same uniform, same tablet, same small box. He stepped inside, half closed the door behind him, and gave me an apologetic look. "Hey, sorry," he said. "I couldn't find the other offices. They all looked closed. Could you maybe just show me which ones they are? I'm new to this route." It struck me as odd, because every door on the floor had a logo and number on it, but I figured he might be stressed about screwing up a delivery. I saved my file, stood up, and walked out into the hallway with him. I pointed out the 3 doors along the hallway. He nodded, followed my hand with his eyes, but didn't walk toward any of them. He stayed next to me in the middle of the corridor. Then he asked, "So, how many people work in your company?" I gave a vague, medium-sized answer. He asked what time people came in, if it was always this empty around 8:30, and whether we had cameras inside. Questions felt wrong for a courier. That was enough for me. I went back into the office and locked the door with the internal lock. 10 minutes later, I looked through the interior window toward the corridor and saw the courier still standing beside our office door. He was staring down at his phone like he was checking messages, but the small box was no longer in his hands. For some reason, that detail bothered me more than anything, because if he was really delivering something, where had it gone? When he finally lifted his head, our eyes met, and his face tightened in a quick annoyed look, like he hated being watched. I jerked back from the glass, almost hitting my chair, and felt my heart slam around in my chest in that obvious panicky way. Standing there alone, I finally admitted to myself that this was not normal courier behavior, and I needed help. I grabbed the desk phone, called first floor reception, and asked the guard if any delivery workers had signed in that morning. He checked the log and said nobody matching that description had registered, just cleaning staff and one early employee, no couriers at all yet. I described the man, the blue shirt, cap, tablet, and the box he carried, and the guard said he had not seen him. He added that the guy might have slipped in through the service entrance, which was not monitored after 7, and said he would come up and check. After I hung up, I locked my computer and stood in the middle of the office listening, wishing I could hear what was happening outside. I moved back toward the window but stayed off to the side so he would not see me if he walked past again. A minute crawled by. Then I heard the handle on our office door start to move slowly up and down, like someone was testing it. I froze completely, did not call out or move, just stared at the door and watched the metal handle shake in the frame. The movement went on for maybe a minute, then stopped with no knock, no voice, nothing, just silence on the other side. I waited another 30 seconds counting in my head, then leaned toward the glass and saw the corridor empty. The man gone. 2 minutes later, the guard arrived. A big man in his 50s I had seen for years at the front desk. He knocked. I unlocked the internal lock, and he stepped inside, listening while I told him about the courier, the questions, and the door handle. His expression went flat, and he told me to stay inside and lock the door again while he checked the floor. He walked the whole level, checked both stairwells and the service rooms, then came back saying he had not found anyone that matched my description. We went down to the little security room near the lobby, and he pulled up the camera recordings from the service entrance and the 4th floor. On the monitor we saw, at around 8:20, the same man in a blue shirt slipping in through the side door with a box and no badge. On the 4th floor camera, he entered our office twice, and then spent about 20 minutes walking the corridor, often stopping at our door to look inside. The guard called the police, and 2 officers came, watched the footage, and then took me aside for questions. One said the man was scouting, and I was an easy target. After that, security tightened at all entrances, doors stayed locked, couriers showed ID, and I started coming no earlier than 9 when the office was already full of colleagues. I was working crisis hotline shifts on weekends during my 2nd year of grad school in clinical psychology. The pay was bad, but it counted toward hours, and it felt better than serving coffee. That Saturday, my shift ended at midnight. The center was in a half-empty shopping district on the edge of town, offices upstairs, stores below. My coworker Naomi shut down her computer and asked if I wanted to hit the 24-hour supermarket downstairs. She needed groceries, I needed cheap coffee and something for dinner, and walking out together felt safer, so I said yes. We took the stairs and stepped into the cold lot. The complex was huge but almost deserted. Only the supermarket on one corner and a gym on the second floor were still open. A few cars sat near the entrance. I hit unlock on my sedan and noticed a white cargo van parked 3 spots down from it. No logo, no rear windows, and no license plates, just bare metal where they should have been. I felt a quick, "that's odd" flicker, then told myself I was tired and overthinking. Inside, it was just another late-night grocery run. We walked the aisles, talked about clients and exams, and threw basics into our baskets. I grabbed coffee, frozen dinners, cereal. I thought once about mentioning the van, then didn't. Nothing had happened. We checked out and headed back toward the doors. Outside, the lot somehow looked even more empty. We said a quick goodbye by the carts. Naomi went toward the far row where she had parked. I went toward my car. I kept my keys in my hand without really thinking about why. I put my bags in the trunk, got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. Habit made me open my GPS and tap home, even though I knew the way. When the map loaded, I shifted into reverse and glanced into my rear view. The white van was now directly behind me, close enough that if I backed up, I would hit it. It blocked the whole space. I was sure it had not been there moments earlier. I could see a shape in the driver's seat, head tilted down like they were looking at something. I told myself people park badly all the time. I tapped the horn twice. Nothing. I waited, then held it longer. Still nothing. No movement at all. Part of me thought drunk, or medical, not threat. Against the louder part of me saying stay in the car, I opened my door. "Hey, you okay?" I called, walking to the driver's side. Up close, the tint made the window dark, so I leaned in. The seat was empty. No driver, no passenger, no movement in the back. The van sat there idling with nobody inside. That was when the chill hit. Suddenly the lot felt too big and too quiet. Naomi was gone. No one else was close enough to hear me if I yelled. I backed away fast, got in my car, and hit the locks again, heart hammering. Sitting there boxed in felt worse than whatever it would do to my suspension, so I cranked the wheel and drove forward, bumping over the low divider into the empty spot in front of me, then angled through the next one toward the main lane. As I straightened the car, I checked my mirror. A man in dark clothes stepped out from behind the metal dumpsters at the edge of the lot and started running toward the van. He moved like someone who had mistimed something and was trying to catch up. That was enough for me. I followed the arrows out and pulled onto the highway toward my apartment. For the first 20 minutes, I drove like normal. I put on a podcast, forced myself to breathe slowly, and tried to think about the classes I had the next day, instead of replaying the lot in my head. The city lights faded until there were no other cars, just my headlights on a dark stretch of highway. That was when I noticed the pair of headlights behind me. At first, they were just there, far back. After a few minutes, I realized they were staying the same distance away. Not gaining, not dropping, just fixed. I eased off the gas. The lights shrank but matched me. I sped up. They did too. My hands got slick on the steering wheel. I changed lanes. A moment later, so did they. It could have been nothing. After the van in the lot, it really did not feel like nothing. An exit sign came up ahead, one of those ramps that curled back toward town. I clicked my turn signal on for it and watched the mirror. A second later, the car behind me signaled too. At the last moment, instead of turning, I kept the wheel straight and stayed on the main highway. In the side mirror, I finally saw the shape clearly enough to be sure. The same white cargo van was already committed to the off-ramp, dropping out of sight while I went past on the straightaway. I let out a long, shaky breath and kept driving. 10 minutes later, my phone rang, cutting through the podcast. It was Naomi. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. She didn't say hello, just, "Where are you right now? Are you still at the center?" I told her I was already on the highway. She said she had just seen a news alert about a kidnapping in that same parking lot 2 nights ago. Same supermarket, after midnight, woman leaving alone. Hearing that made my stomach drop. It fit too well with what had just happened. I told her about the van in quick pieces so I wouldn't lose focus on the road. No plates, empty driver's seat, the man coming from behind the dumpsters, the headlights that had followed me, the exit trick. She went quiet and then said, very clear, "Do not go home. Come here." My place. I'm not kidding. Naomi lived in a gated community, and she knew my building was on a dark side street with no cameras and a half-broken security door. Going home suddenly felt stupid. I agreed, said, "Okay, I'll come to you," and changed the route on my GPS. Once I turned off the main highway toward her area, traffic thinned out again. For a while, it was just me and a couple of trucks way ahead. I kept checking my mirrors and everything looked normal. I started thinking maybe the van really had taken that exit and I'd scared myself for nothing. I remember feeling a little embarrassed about how fast my heart had been going in the parking lot. About 15 minutes from Naomi's, on another dark stretch with no cars right around me, I saw headlights appear in the rear view, far back at first. They were coming up faster than the normal flow. As they got closer, I could make out the shape behind them. A white, windowless rectangle. The same van. Any hope that I'd imagined things just disappeared. This time, it didn't hang back. It closed the gap until it was riding my bumper, then slid into the right lane like it was going to pass. Instead of passing, it drifted toward my lane, edging me toward the shoulder. I gripped the wheel so hard my hands hurt. Every time I tried to move away, it moved with me, enough to keep pressure on. That was when it clicked. He wasn't just being an idiot. He was trying to force me to stop or wreck. I grabbed my phone, hit 911, put it on speaker, and kept my eyes on the road. I told the dispatcher my name, that I was a grad student driving toward the east side, and that a white cargo van with no plates was following me and trying to run me off the highway. I gave the highway number and direction and whatever mile marker I could see. She asked a few quick questions, then said officers were already in the area and told me not to pull over for any reason. Just keep driving toward the next big intersection because patrol cars were setting up ahead. The van kept trying to pass me on the right, lunging up beside me, so I stopped backing off and pushed the gas down. The speedometer climbed past what I usually drove. Around 85, I saw flashing lights ahead and several police cars across the road. The dispatcher said that was them and told me to slow and stop in front of them. I braked hard and halted just before the cruisers. Behind me, the van jerked like the driver wanted a U-turn, but 2 patrol cars shot forward and trapped it while another closed in behind. I watched them pull him out and push him over the hood. Later, they said the van held rope, duct tape, and bottles that tested as chloroform. The driver was tied to 3 cases in other states where women had escaped, but nothing had stuck. I gave statement, finished school, avoid lots, watch cars, and treat that paranoid feeling as my best defense.